heard. Agenda item 4, verification of the posting of the agenda.
The agenda was posted on August 3rd as stated on the agenda and in accordance with Churchill County Code and Nevada Revised Statutes.
Agenda item 5, approval of the agenda as submitted or revised. Do I have a motion for the,
I move that we approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
the motion has been made and seconded for the approve the agenda as submitted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Agenda item 6, verification of notification of all landowners in accordance with the NRS and the Churchill County Consolidated Development Code.
All efforts were made to contact landowners as required.
Agenda item 7, approval of minutes of the meeting held on July the 12th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting held on July 12th, 2023.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Picotti, seconded by Commissioner Deal. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Agenda item 8, old business, item A, temporary use permit granted by the Board of County Commissioners to Ruth Miller for the property located at 4810 Schindler Road. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Please come forward. Please push the microphone button there. State your name and address for the record once the microphone turns green.
Sir, my name is Ruth Miller. I'm the property owner,
Your address?
4810 Schindler Road.
Thank you. Director Spross, do you have a summary of this application?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Ross for the record. So the original application for this TUP was heard by this board on January 11th of 2023. At that time, the applicant was requesting a temporary quarters to allow acquaintances who have no home to live in on the property. Michael Irby and Marianne Tinnemeyer had been renting, but the landlord had sold the property, and they've been unable to find another place. They will live in the RV, and the applicant will live in the permanent home. At that time, this board had denied the temporary use permit, and so the applicant appealed this to the Board of County Commissioners, at which time the Board of County Commissioners granted a 6-month temporary use permit, which expires on August 15th, 2023. And so this is the application for that renewal. I did receive an update from our code compliance issue that I would just like to read for the board, as I received this just about an hour ago. Jackie Stewart with Social Services went out to the property on May 31st, spoke to Annie, who was the RV occupant, provided her an application for assistance, and offered to help Annie fill it out. Annie acted as though she had never been told there are any issues with her and her husband living in the RV on the property. And Annie had told Jackie that Michael hasn't been staying there as he likes to camp. Jackie has not heard from Annie or Michael since May 31st, 2023. Social Services had not received an application for assistance from them to date, and Jackie is still willing to help them out. They just need to submit the application or make an appointment to help get it filled out. Much progress has been made towards cleaning up the property. There's more progress to be had before the property is entirely cleaned up. The number of unlicensed, unregistered, inoperable, or junk motor vehicles has reduced. As of April, there were a total of 4 unlicensed, unregistered, unroadworthy vehicles, which is 2 more that were allowed by law. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does the applicant have anything they would like further input or comments?
And I do apologize. They are not family. There is a point where I cannot do more than say, hey, how are you doing with everything? Is there anything I can do to help? I was not aware that they had not yet got that in. The best I can do is update and say they did tell me about 2 hours ago that they believe they do have a place in town. However, that landlord says there are floors that need to be refinished, and they believe it will be about 2 weeks before they are able to move in. So I do apologize. That does not help anybody that they did not get their end of things done.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any questions or discussion from the commission?
Mr. Chair, Zach Bunyer for the record. So I was here when we denied your application, and I believe the county commissioners overruled and give you 6 months, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they were supposed to be working on this from the time that this application was initiated, correct?
Yes, sir.
But there hasn't been any action, and it's kind of based on my recommendation to deny it previously. We are no different off 6 months later. I don't know if, I mean, I'll leave this up to the other commissioners, but
Well,
I
sir,
think maybe our
absolutely-
decision first was the right decision.
I apologize. I absolutely understand. And like I said, what was just submitted is unfortunately news to me as well. They have told me several of the different apartment complexes around town, as far as income-based, they have run into issues with wait lists, with their income does not meet the 3 times the rent that's required. And they had told me that they were doing their share of things. However, you know, I certainly can only go by what they told me to this point. That is, like I said, and I do apologize to the commission, that is news to me.
Ms. Miller, can I get one clarification? You stated that they had found a place to live and that they would be moving out in 2 weeks.
What I was told, and this was about 2 hours ago, they have a place on, I believe it is Virginia Street here in town near Epworth Methodist. However, their landlord does need to do some work before they can move in. I did request a specific move-in date, and if at all possible, a copy of the signed rental agreement stating that date so that I could have some proof that there is an end date in sight, and was told that they would hopefully be able to get me that by Friday.
My second question is going to be, assuming this is not renewed, because this is going to go to the 15th and they were going to move out by August, how long would it take you to remove the temporary, I guess, RV from the property?
It is their RV, so if there is a date that it must be gone by, I will let them know that I have no choice, and that is the date it must find a new place to park. One of the vehicles on the property that is not licensed is their Jeep as well. I still have one more of my own that was supposed to have been hauled off by now, and I'm trying to find somebody else who will haul it for scrap.
Please
Thank you.
speak more into that mic.
I do apologize.
Jeff Goings for the record. So I just want to read, I was another member of the board who voted to not approve this. And it appears to me that, given what we've got here, the temporary use permit, in 2 weeks, these people should be gone according to what we're finding out, that they've applied for applications for assistance. Sounds like they have a place to live, or are getting ready to move into this new facility place, wherever they're going. I'm almost apprehensive to even try to extend this even a little bit, just because, as Member Bunyard said, we've kind of been kicking this can down the road now for a little over 6 months, and we've got some movement, but I think it needs to be cleaned up and finished within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Director Spross?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, can I make a recommendation for the board to consider? Just a point of clarification for Commissioner Goings. They have not applied, they have not submitted an application with Social Services. Social Services is still prepared to help them out, but they have not received anything yet. But in terms of a possible consideration would be to not take action on this TUP today, table this to the next meeting. That's a period of 1 month. If at that point in time this issue is not resolved, then it would be denied. That's a consideration for the board.
Thank you. Also, I have a point of clarification. If we do deny it today, it stops on the 15th of August. And then if the people are not gone, would it fall into code compliance to finish making sure they're off the property?
That is correct, but I would like to point out that a decision made here by this board can once again be appealed by the Board of County Commissioners, and so the applicant would once again be able to apply to have an appeal or to overturn your ruling. So, but you are correct that upon April 15th, the TUP expires. Sorry, August 15th, the TUP expires and then would become code enforcement. And code enforcement has been working with the applicant on the balance of things that needed to be done, such as the removal of the inoperable vehicles and things like that. So it would just continue.
Thank you. If we do deny it, it falls back to the county commissioners as they are the ones who approved it to begin with. The applicant does not qualify under our standards for a TUP, so please keep that into consideration. Is there any further discussion from the commission? None heard. Is there any public comment concerning this matter? None heard. I would ask the commission for a decision to approve or deny this application.
Zach Bunyard for the record. I move that we go ahead and table this for 1 month on the temporary use permit.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Bunyard, second by Commissioner Deal to table this application for a 30-day period. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. You have 30 more days to comply, so we will be back on the agenda next month.
Okay, thank
All right.
you. May I get a copy of that statement from your office?
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.
Agenda item 8, old business. Item B, temporary use permit renewal application for temporary quarters during home construction, filed by Carrie Bassford for property located at 895 Howard Place. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? No one coming forward to speak. Commissioner Director Spross, do you have a summary of this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Spross for the record. And so this application is a renewal for a temporary use permit for home construction. The original request for this was back in August of 2020, and so the applicant has been before this board on several occasions. For the renewal, we did receive another application with a narrative on progress, which is, after having the septic system put in, I have been working towards making up the house floor plans made to the county codes, and I have made up a plot plan also. My in-law Stephen is a contractor, and he's helping me by making up the plans to code. I intend to have them finished and all of them submitted and pay for the building permit and impact fees ASAP. I did receive a comment from the building department, and they have acknowledged that a building permit was submitted on August 3rd of this year. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you. Does the commission have any discussion or questions?
Zach Bunyard for the record. Chris, there hasn't, it's just the building permit that's been submitted since the last time we approved this, correct? He just got the septic in before the previous approval.
That's correct. That's correct.
And he just submitted his.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, one thing I would like to mention, as you can't see on the map, but this house is, it's located directly north of the Navy fly zone. The Navy has shown some interest in purchasing this property. I do believe Robin Schofield is here, and you may want to ask her any questions with regards to if there's been any movement or progress or anything like that on that property.
Thank you. Would you like to come forward, please, and comment?
You're welcome.
If you don't mind, state your name and address for the record and have the microphone close to you.
No worries. Robin Schofield. I'm Naval Air Station Fallon Community Planning and Liaison Officer. Personal address, 340 Winchester. So the Navy is interested in this. As he stated, this is just north of our properties. The way our runway goes, that is the way we take off. So we are interested in that property if the owner is willing to sell. I have not had time to make contact with him, that's on me, but we are interested in that property.
Thank you. Do you know a timeline, if you were to have direction to reach out to the property owner, when that would be?
I would definitely like to do it in the next 2 weeks. I definitely have aims to do that.
Okay. Director Sprouse, do you know if the property owner, are they local? Do they live local?
I think they live on the RV.
I believe that they are, yes.
Because he did live in California. I wasn't for sure.
Yeah, I believe that he is.
I think that's what the temporary, because he's been living in a camp trailer on the property.
Is there any further questions or discussion from the commission?
Jeff Goings for the record. Robin. Sorry, was that me?
I have no idea.
Okay. I'm just curious, what would the Navy, just as a buffer piece of property, or would there be something?
That's a really good question, and that's where I need to do a little bit more research on this. Does it have water rights associated with it? Was it ag land? And if it is, we do have an ag program that we could lease it back and somebody at the public, if they wanted to use it for ag property. But that's definitely where I need to do a little bit more research on what could be done with it, or it will be just become a property that we maintain for dust, noxious weeds, that type of thing.
Dean Patterson for the record. Talking to Mr. Bassford, it sounds like he does have water rights. I don't know if as you can see, he might not be farming the property, but according to him, he has water rights. So this property could go into the Navy's ag operations. It is bordering the Navy on its east side, the south side, and then the Navy property kind of wraps around toward the west side too. And so, yeah, it's right off the end of the runway. You just can't quite see it. It's just off the map that you see on the screen.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Is there any?
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. I guess what bothers me tonight on this one is that they didn't show up. I mean, something this important to renew this temporary use permit and not to come. And then it sounds like this is a can that's been kicked down the road for a long time. So I'm kind of the sentiment to deny it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Chris Sprouse for the record. This information being shared by Robin is more for informational purposes more than it is anything else. I wouldn't want that to impact your decision one way or the other. It was just to let you know that there may be some future interest in that property. By no means should it have any bearing on your decision today.
Jeff Goings for the record, and along with Member Hyde here, I mean, we've been working at this that's was approved in 2020, and now we're in 23, and we've got a septic tank done. I think if we were really interested in moving forward, we'd be moving forward.
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I'm under the impression also, this originated in 2020, and now it's 2023, and they're just now getting their building permit?
That's correct. As part of the building permit application, the requirement to pay the impact fees is also due upon receipt of the permit. So many times there's people and impact fees are considerable, and as you know, and many times it takes some effort to pull all of that together. So that's why I think in the past you've seen some delays, but this will be the third request for an extension since the original approval.
So at this time, they have paid the impact fees, or no?
No, they have submitted their plans for review, and then those fees would not be due until they came to pick up the permit after its final review.
After their-
But I have to believe that if somebody is willing to submit for their building permit, they have pulled together the funds to also be able to, at that time, pick up the permit and
Pick
pay
up.
the impact fees. Yes.
Thank you.
I also, Dean Patterson for the record, I also wanted to point out that Mr. Bassford has installed septic and power and a well, so.
Thank you. Is there any public comment concerning this matter? None heard. Is there any further discussion? If not, call for a motion in this matter to approve or deny.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. I move that we do not renew the application for temporary use permit on this property, 007-851-19.
Second.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Goings, second by Commissioner Hyde, that we do not approve the temporary use permit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye, or aye. I only heard 3 people. Commissioner Picotti, how do you vote? I denied. Denied. And Commissioner Deal? I didn't hear you.
You didn't hear me?
No.
I said, aye.
Aye, 4 to deny. Okay. The vote is 4 or 5 to 1. Motion carries to deny the temporary use permit.
So now what happens?
I think it was unanimous. I think it was unanimous. I don't think anybody voted.
I did.
You voted to approve the extension.
I voted to not, I approve, to approve it, not deny it. Agenda item 8, old business. Item C, review of a special use permit that was previously granted to Paul and Tiffany Picotti for property located at 2030 Reno Highway. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Commissioner Picotti has recused himself from this matter.
Could I
Please
ask-
state your name and address for the record.
Paul Picotti, 645 Peaceful Way, Fallon, Nevada.
Director Spross, would you like to summarize the application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Spross for the record. So this is the one-year review of the special use permit granted to Mr. Picotti. We routinely have these one-year reviews to make sure that progress according to the conditions of the SUP are being met. I met with Mr. Picotti a couple of weeks ago, or maybe even less. Everything has been met on the application with the exception of 3 items. One of those items is a 6-foot screen fence, which is required at the rear of the parking lot to prevent people not only exiting the facility, but also coming into the property from the mobile home park that's in the back. The other was the urban street improvements along Highway 50 needed to be completed, or Mr. Picotti needed to put up a financial security in the form of a bond or certificate of deposit, or if he had documentation from the Nevada Department of Transportation that work was being completed as part of a project that they're doing right now. And then the final was a 10-foot street landscaping buffer that needs to be installed as part of US 50, along US 50. I spoke to Mr. Picotti about his plans for that, and I will let him share. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Picotti?
Yes, so I'm a little too close. The fence in the back, that hasn't been constructed yet because we're getting the entire back lot paved. And if the elevation changes, that's going to change where the fence goes. So we did agree to put some type of barrier across the back because we have concerns as well as the county does, because the trailer park in the back, we have constant traffic going through there that I didn't think would happen, but they're constantly driving through there, and we understand the need for, at least a barrier before we can put the fence up. So as soon as A&K comes through, and it's going to be within the next month or two, because they're going to do that back parking lot when they do the new road in front of the property. That may change the elevation, then we'll have the fence put up. The front lot is going to be done by NDOT. I spoke with them, a representative from NDOT, about 2 weeks ago, and they have sent all of the elevation stuff over to their engineers. They've got an issue right now where with drainage, all the water drains, down that from the road through the middle of the two buildings, and their concern is when they put the sidewalk in, they have to have some type of drainage, otherwise it's gonna pile up onto the road or continue to flow through the middle of the property and pile up in the back. So they have a plan possibly to put two drainage, not ditches, but culverts in on either end of the sidewalks that you see in front of those two properties there. I do not have a written letter. I have a call into NDOT. The folks that came out to do it, they were not able to give me anything in writing there. And when I left a message with NDOT, I'll speak with them again. I know Dean has a decent contact as well, and maybe I can get that one from him. But when that goes in, then we can put in our landscaping, like you see at the front of Sonic. We're just gonna put some, dry landscape in there and some stones and just make it look good.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. Paul, you're talking about putting barricades in the back. The property next to you, which would be west of you, is Jesse Seguras. Is he doing the same thing?
Yes, everything that we do on the property, we're just gonna split into the cost of doing it. So the fence will all be one fence going across the entire back of the property. The front will also be mirrored. In the driveway, we had an engineering drawing done on it from Loomis, and they came up with a single driveway that goes through the middle and then splits off to each property. And Jesse Segura is also willing, he's gonna split half of that. If worst case scenario, NDOT, ever denied the build, then we'll do it. It was estimated at, I believe, $52,000 to have that roadway done, and we would just split it and have it done. We're just really crossing our fingers that NDOT pulls through.
Thank you.
Jeff Goings, Paul. Just for clarification, so the barriers that you're going to have A&K put up, they will extend on to Segura's property as well, so that whole back end will be covered, okay.
Yep, the whole back end will be covered so that traffic can't go through there because it's turned into a highway.
One more question there, Paul. With NDOT, we're talking about either posting a bond or having something from them that's imminent. You say you've reached out to them and they haven't called you back, and I guess I'm just concerned about what's your next move there with NDOT?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get a better contact. The gentleman that came out, he was like, well, I'm not, I can't be the one to give you a written authorization. So I've got to contact the engineers, I believe, in Carson, who I have a call in, but I haven't heard back. I called him a couple times. But if I can corner some people that I know, maybe I can get a little bit better traction on getting their plans put together. What the improvements are, it's the same thing that went down the other side of the road from that corner of Allen all the way down. Yeah, that improvement right there. That was an NDOT-funded improvement, and they're doing the same thing on the other side of the road. It's just, I think it's gonna, I don't know the exact date of it, but that's this phase 2 of the sidewalk improvement for Fallon. And it's gonna go across the front of our property. And,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add one more thing. What makes this kind of unique is typically to record a parcel split, with the county, you either have to perform the improvements or you have to bond the improvements. For reasons of a financial nature, Mr. Picodi approached the Board of County Commissioners to get some reprieve, and the board approved Mr. Picodi to allow him to record the map and then gave him 4 months to provide that bond. And the reason this is important, that 4 months is set to expire here in the next week or two. So that's why I've kind of been harping on Mr. Picodi a little bit about getting something from NDOT, so that if we had that, that would then alleviate that requirement for that bond. Without that, it kind of puts you in a tough position, as the Board of County Commissioners had to put that 4-month or 120-day deadline on that, so.
Yeah, and we are, in agreement, is if we can't get NDOT to give us a written approval, then most likely what we'll do is we'll put a CD up for it. I went to do the bond paperwork, and initializing a bond is really difficult, and you end up having to pay, $1,500 for just to do the bond, and then you lose that. I'll just do a CD for the whole thing and then let it sit with the county, and when it comes time for, after the completion of NDOT, then we'll just get that money back, or we'll take, we'll get it done and we'll have someone do it and then get the CD back.
Thank you. Clarification, you're waiting to see if NDOT will include your improvements within the project of Highway 50s, and if, once they tell you yes or no, that's when you will fund the project and move forward. Okay. So should we, so what's a realistic timeline to get the approval from NDOT to blacktop the back parking lot, put the fence up? What would be something that's doable?
So what I had proposed is, of course, we got to, comply with getting either the CD or the bond or the NDOT, by the end of the established time, which we understand. For the back, I propose putting something across there. I'd like to put some barriers up, some concrete barriers, which I just haven't had time to go down to A&K and get some and put them up. I'm in full agreement. We do not want, access there, because there's a lot of traffic. There was a fence up there previously, but the fence was severely dilapidated. It was an eyesore, and we had to take it down because we hooked up to the county's water and sewer system. Those two buildings were they were on a well that wasn't established with the county. So we ended up hooking the water and sewer up to the county's sewer system, and we had to remove the fence to get under there and hook up to the water systems. And that fence was destroyed when we took it down because it was just a mess. So we're fully committed to putting, a nice new fence up there. But like I was stated earlier, A&K is coming in to do a paving job in there, and they're going to change the elevation of it. So we were, hoping to just, once it's paved, then we put a fence up over the paved part.
So do you think 60 days you would have an answer from NDOT and you would have the barriers up?
I can either have an answer, or I'll put the CD up and I'll put some type of barrier across there. I do have a call-in with a fence company, so maybe we'll just put like a chain link up for a temporary deal, because I don't want it to look bad.
Okay.
I want it to look decent.
So do you think you can accomplish all this within that 120-day period the county commissioners approved you for?
Well, that's already up. I believe that was, yeah. We got to do that sooner.
We have either days or it's already surpassed, so we're very close to that line.
So that was going to be my question, Chris, then. So this 120 days that you're bumping up against right now, Paul, that was a date that was given by the county commissioners. What we're looking at then, really for our side of it, is what kind of a timeline are you looking on the back side of that to put the barriers up or something back there to stop that traffic flow? Because really the 120 days is the county commissioner's call.
Right, yeah, absolutely. The whole CD thing, I mean, we can do it whenever. I'm just hoping that NDOT, sends me an email at some point and says, here's the proposal that we're doing for Fallon. Because that's going to save us each, $20,000, that would be really helpful. The fence, we're just waiting for A&K to do the paving, and they're going to change the elevation of it. But in the interim, I have no objection whatsoever. I want to put some barriers up. We just got to find something that decent. I don't want to put railroad ties up and then people are pushing them around, and I didn't want it to look,
So that was,
bad.
I think really that's what we're gonna basically just say, hey, can you give us a timeline on when you can throw some barriers up?
Yeah,
Concrete barriers, whatever it
Yeah,
takes to,
we can
to stop
say
your
that-
flow of traffic until your fence is done.
Yeah, the end of the month for the barriers for sure. And then the timeline for the CD or NDOT is sooner than that. I don't know the exact date, but I believe it's end of the month.
Mr. Chair, just to propose a couple of options, and I hate to keep doing this, but you could table this for 1 month. That would give Mr. Picotti 30 days to take care of putting the concrete barrier rails in and potentially either have some sort of written correspondence from NDOT or be able to put the CD together. Or you can determine a time frame of 30, 60, 90 days, whatever you guys feel comfortable with. But to me, those are two options that I request consideration.
Thank you.
Yep, and just so the board is aware, it was the process has taken about 2.5 years to get this building back up to snuff. It was severely out of code in every manner, and we've gotten it back there except for a few things. And we just opened it about 2.5 months ago, so we finally got to the point where we opened the building up. It's doing good, sustaining itself, and we're continuing improvement. We got A&K coming in and doing the paving, and we want the front edge of the buildings to look like the rest of them. We want it to look good. As you can see, we've put a substantial amount of money into that building to make it, to where it needs to be for being right in the middle of Fallon.
Thank you. Is there any other commission comments, discussion? Is there any public comment concerning this matter? At this time, I ask for the commission to make a decision to approve or deny or table this motion, or this application.
Mr. Chair, Zach Bunyan for the record. I move that we go ahead and table this for 1 month so we can get more information on this.
The motion was made by Commissioner Bunyard, seconded by Commissioner Goins, that we table this item for 30 days. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Aye, or excuse me, I am confused. I approve the table. The motion carries 5-0 with Commissioner Picotti recusing himself. Thank you.
Mr. Picotti, Dean Patterson for the record. Quick question. Sounds like the bond or letter from NDOT will be resolved pretty quickly, and the barriers will be installed pretty quickly. That kind of leaves getting the fence up, and that's dependent on paving the parking lot. Do you know when, or approximately when, that might happen?
A&K is doing the paving job when they do the road here in the next few weeks. So when that gets ripped up and they go through, they're gonna go back there and do the paving job in that.
So it's possible that could even be done within a month.
It absolutely could, depending on their timeline, but they're right down the road right now.
Great, thank you.
Agenda item 9, public hearings. Item A, temporary use permit for temporary quarters during home construction, filed by Sean and Casey Reich for property located at 4886 Oren Road. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Please come forward. Please state your name and address for the record. The microphone will turn green by push the little microphone button, and make sure the microphone's close to your mouth.
Casey and Sean Rick, 4886 Oran.
Thank you. Director Spross, do you have a summary of this application?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Spross for the record. So this application is for a temporary use permit. The use table listing is temporary quarters for home construction. The applicant are Sean and Casey Reich, and the owner is the same. The site is 4886 Oren Road. which is APN 006-292-74. It's composed of 5 acres. The designation in the master plan is agricultural, and the zoning is A5. So the applicant is requesting a temporary use permit for temporary quarters for home construction to place a recreational vehicle on the property during the construction of the home. The property has some construction done already, and the RV is already on site. The application does not give an age for the RV unit. The application indicates that the utility services are present on the property since a foundation had already been installed for a house. The RV will be regularly used and moved for travel at times during the year. The RV will be maintained as a self-sufficient unit. The application proposes less permanent service connections, more similar to an RV park than any other similar TUP proposals. Additional information provided in the application. And as a note, this may not be acceptable to the building department for long-term use, and the service connection upgrades may be required. I do have a letter from the building department, which I will read into the record in a minute. So temporary living quarters are permitted as long as they are parked on the same parcel of land and utilized as a temporary residence during the construction. The temporary use permit shall be subject to yearly renewals and shall terminate upon expiration of the building permit or within 30 days of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Each yearly renewal will require evidence of substantial progress toward the construction. So the site of the proposed RV is on the same lot as the new home. Any RV, including pop-outs, must meet a 5-foot setback from the property line, which is currently met. The conditions of approval will require obtaining all necessary building permits and RV setup permits. This permit will require annual review if not completed within the first year. If no progress is made these items before the annual review, the Planning Commission might not renew the permit. So the letter that I received from the building department outlines the requirements, and I will give you a copy of this letter. It basically says, if the temporary use permit is approved, the Churchill County Building Department requires the following prior to occupation of the recreational vehicle. It requires a placement permit. It must be applied for and issued for the recreational vehicle within 30 days of the TUP approval, and that has a $200 fee. The electrical connection to the recreational vehicle must be inspected and approved by the Churchill County Building Department, and the septic connection to the recreational vehicle must be inspected and approved by the Churchill County Building Department. Before construction of any structure commences, the building department requires the following. A building permit must be applied for and issued prior to starting any construction. The impact fees will be required to be paid at the time the permit issuance for the residents, and inspections of all phases of construction is required. I did receive additional information that the septic system was installed, inspected, and completed and approved on August 9th of 2022. And so far, this is the only permit that has been applied for. What is this here? Okay. I've just been handed a letter that was written by a neighbor regarding the temporary use permit filed by Sean and Casey Reich for use of a motorhome for their living quarters at 4886 Oren Road on a 5-acre parcel during construction of the proposed home. Our concerns are as follows. Since the Reichs have purchased the lot, Sean and Casey have not worked on the pre-existing foundation other than pouring a concrete slab in the proposed garage area. I believe they have lived in the motorhome at the location for approximately 3 years. We would only agree to this request if the building permit was in place and financing was in place for only 1 year while home is under construction. And 3, up to this point, for the last 3 years, the Reichs have not worked on the structure at all, other than a garage slab. They have redrawn existing building plan. Other than that, they have accumulated several vehicles that don't run, car bodies just sitting on the ground, and put up fabric for fencing. Put up a makeshift patio between the motorhome and existing garage. If this is allowed to continue, it is not only an eyesore, but brings the property value down around our community. At this point, it looks more like a junkyard than a home site. We looked for a community like this to move into because everyone takes care of their home and property. We did not think we would have to worry about someone trying to living in their motorhome indefinitely. That's being read for the record. With that,
Is there a name on that for the record?
yeah, I'm not obligated to tell you the name that's on here.
Thank you.
With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So you're not,
Excuse me.
they don't have to
Excuse me.
tell?
State your name for the record, please.
I'm Sean Reich.
Please push the microphone button.
I'm Sean Reich.
Okay,
They don't have to say who wrote the letter? I was just wondering.
okay, we'll get clarification.
Okay.
Please, stand by.
Okay.
They don't have to, if it's going to be placed in the record as the whole
Well, that's
letter, it will
fine.
be, but it was read by Mr. Spross, and so,
Well, I'm just going to say this really quick. When I talked to Mr. Patterson, he said it's not about what happened up till now because the foundation that was there actually has handprints in it and a mark from 2006, okay? I went through the foundation was poured in 2006 by someone I think you guys all know, Mr. Polk. And he's kind of infamous around in this area. When we first got the correspondence about all of this, we were addressed as him, even though we are the legal owners, okay? So we own that property outright. We don't own a bank, we don't owe anything. I had money to build. We spent tens of thousands of dollars on engineered plans for that house. If you guys have anything in history that's been going on, you know that the prices of everything exploded. We went from $240 a board foot to over $2,100 a board foot. And so basically it quadrupled the price of building the house. Right now we're gonna redraw the house so that it's a smaller house, but the prices have also come down too. So our plan is, whatever you guys decide, then we'll plan on doing whatever we gotta do. Because we own it outright. We don't owe anybody anything. I have money to build. I have the plans. I have everything that you need. That foundation has been there before anybody in that neighborhood even moved there or had anything to do with that neighborhood. And when I bought the property, okay, I was gonna put a mobile on there, a manufactured home, and the very last day when we signed our escrow papers, they put some kind of BS in there that said it had to be a certain square foot and it had to be a stick-built house. And none of that has to do anything with Churchill County anything, okay? So we rethought our plans. We were gonna put a mobile on there, it would have been done. We'd be paying taxes on it right now. We redid. You want to look at these plans? It's a beautiful house. The reason that we haven't done it is because now we have to have, right now Russ is redrawing our plans to make it smaller. We plan on complying, and you're talking about junk cars. There's 2 cars that don't run. Every single one of those hot rods, I have over $100,000 worth of cars. I've been building cars my whole life. One person's junk is another man's treasure. I mean, some of my neighbors have old tractors parked in front of their house. Is that considered a relic or junk? I mean, is it an eyesore or is it something that's cool? I'm just at the point to where I understand it kind of looks junky on the grand scope of things, but I'm doing the best I can. I want to put the money into this place. If you don't want us in your town, my wife was born in Lovelock. I was raised in Sparks. We grew up in Sparks. We lived here our whole life. We moved out of Sparks, and we looked everywhere. We picked Fallon because it was a very, very nice place. We liked the parks, we liked the people, we liked the stores, everything about this place. We love where we are in that neighborhood. If we're not wanted there, we will move along. I would offer anybody that wants to buy that property, make an offer. There's enough people here that are opposed to us building on that, to where if they got together, they could make that their community property thing, build a swimming pool, do whatever they want with it.
Mr.
But
Reich?
I own it outright, and I feel like I got called in front of the principal's office here, you know what I mean? I haven't been living there for years, and I don't know where they got that. We're in and out. We have sick parents. Well, I feel like I've been called out.
Let me interrupt. Let me interrupt.
I'm
okay?
just like,
You're not being called out.
I'm
Okay,
having an
listen.
anxiety attack, sir, so I'm
Okay,
gonna try to calm down.
let's just calm down for a second. You're not being called out. The public has a right to write a letter, and it has a right to be read into the record. Okay, so what someone says does not matter to us. We take it for what it is. We listen to the letter, we listen to you, we listen to the facts, and then we make our decision, okay? We do not need to know about your house plans just yet. We need to know about what process you're taking and the speed of things and how you're gonna do things. That's sort of what we're looking at right now at the moment, okay? So just take a break for a second. Does your wife have anything she'd like to add?
I do have something I'd like to add.
Please.
I'm sorry. Because of the fact that the foundation was there, it's a lot harder if you have to try to get funding to help with the rest of the funding that we would need to finish the house. Nobody will loan on something that already has a foundation on it. We were told that we could build it, we could use it if we can get an architect to write it up and to approve it. It is a long process. Like he said, we're redrawing the plans, we're making it smaller. It's not gonna be a 4,200 square foot monstrosity that Mr. Polk, two-story that Mr. Polk had originally planned for. So then we redid the plans, and then we redid it even one more time. We're waiting on our architect now so that we can redraw the plans to make it even smaller because of the financial aspect of it.
We
So making
understand.
it to where it's more affordable to
Okay.
build. We have offered our neighbors the opportunity to purchase it if they wanted to purchase it, and we didn't have any takers. And as far as the automobiles go, that's something that we do. We restore and refurbish classic and antique automobiles. If you look at the picture, they're all lined up in a nice row. Everything has all of the parts attached. Only 2 of them, like he said, are not running, not registered. And like he said, they're antiques.
We understand.
Mr. Chairman.
And that's, we don't really want to talk about the vehicles at this time, has no bearing
Right.
on our decision tonight, okay?
Mr. Chairman,
Just
Jeff
one-
Goings for the record. Folks, you're here for a special use permit on your temporary use permit, excuse me, for your motorhome. That's what we're gonna look at tonight, and that's what we're gonna go on. So the rest of what we're talking about, as long as you're meeting the codes and complying, that's what we're gonna look at here tonight, so.
Well,
Yeah,
when we
no, it's
walk
fine.
in and see several neighbors all lined up, we feel like we're being attacked. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling, like he said, like you're at the principal's office, and
Okay,
everybody's
we
parents are there.
We understand that.
The whole
but you
room
can-
is filled up with
okay.
people from our neighborhood,
E-
so.
Everyone has a right to be here, okay?
I
Now, unless
understand
someone
that.
approached you, that's a whole different story, okay? So let's just let that be. Like Commissioner Goins stated, we're here to discuss a temporary use permit for the use of your motorhome on the property while you construct the home, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Mr. Patterson? you have-
Yes, just to get us back on track, how long do you folks think it'll take to build the home? And, you know, if you can talk about the different steps and how long they'll take.
I'm hard of hearing, I didn't hear
He
you.
said, how long do you think it'll take us to build?
What?
How long do you think it'll take us to build the house?
Please
Well-
push the microphone button there, make sure it's green. How long?
It says significant progress, and with the way that everything works, if we get a start date, I would say that we would have it framed and sealed within a year, you know what I mean? And having a C of O as an owner-builder in a year would be unrealistic to even possibly say that, okay? What I can guarantee you is significant improvement. I'll have the floor in, I'll have the walls framed, I'll have a roof on it. I have the package all done up, the pricing, all of that stuff. So my point is if I have to, I'll take the money that I've saved to build this house and I'll buy another property, I guess. And then that'll go back right into disrepair like it was. I mean, it was a junk pile when we bought it.
We're talking.
I know, I'm just saying,
We're asking for the timeline to build the home, and you give that to us, that within one.
significant
that
progress in a year.
would be to have it under roof.
Yes,
Within 1 year is your answer.
yes, sir.
Okay, and there is a septic tank on the property? Yes
There-
or no?
There's
Yes?
well, septic, power, all of
Okay.
that was existing when we bought the property,
right.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there any, Commissioner?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair, can I just continue with my report?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So after all that, after reviewing the application, the staff is making a recommendation to approve this TUP under the following conditions. 1, the temporary quarters must comply with Churchill County Code. 2, all required building department approvals and safety certificates must be obtained. Water, sewer, and power services that are acceptable to the building department shall be provided to the temporary quarters. Any setup permit necessary for the setup of the temporary quarters must be obtained along with any required inspections of water, septic, and electrical connections of connecting to a service. C, all necessary permits for the home construction must be obtained. 3, the temporary quarters must use temporary construction practices. It may not be placed on a permanent foundation. No manufactured homes may be used as the temporary residence while constructing a home. 4, this temporary use permit is subject to annual renewal. The applicant must show substantial progress of home construction during the annual review hearing. And finally, 5, once home construction is complete enough to allow habitation, the RV must be disconnected from water, sewer, power services and be made a lawful at its subsequent location.
Thank you. Is there any other commission questions?
Yes, may I?
Commissioner Deal.
Sir, do you have your RV hooked up to the septic and the power?
Like I was saying before, we're in and out, so we have older parents now. So we're between Lovelock and here, and we use our RV for that. So from what he was saying, as soon as we get this, it needs to be hooked up permanently. So you know what I mean?
For now, you're traveling in it, but when you're gonna start your home, you will have it done
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
permanently.
Yeah, we'll follow all the,
And you will have it inspected by the building department.
absolutely.
If you turn to the next page that we submitted, it shows a list right there of all of the utilities that are on site and kind of lists everything and where everything's at so that you have a reference.
I was just wondering if you
Okay.
did understand.
Yes.
Understand that, okay. And have you gotten your permits from the building department yet?
We
Any
have
time?
not, ma'am. I'm waiting for the
You're waiting
smaller
for-
plan.
Okay, I got it.
This plan is still bigger, so we revised to come down, and now the prices of lumber and everything have come down, so I'm hoping that we're gonna really meet in the middle. Because if you look at the house, it's mostly garage. And so all of the cars won't be an issue, they'll all be in garages.
They'll be-
Everything's gonna
very
be
good.
good. And, I mean, that's our plan. The house has like 5-car garage on it, and the house is gonna be relatively small, so yes,
So your cars that you have will be inside a garage, so they won't be outside on the property?
it'll be at your house.
Okay.
They're all for sale.
Jeff
Thank you.
Goings
Is
again
there
for the
any-
record.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you understood that Director Spross read these 5 requirements. Actually, there's more than that. There's about 8 when it's all said and done. Did you understand those requirements and are accepting of those requirements?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Does the commission have any other questions or discussion?
I did have a quick question, or a couple of them. How long have you been at the property then?
We closed escrow in 2022, I think,
Okay, and then you've been living in the RV since then?
2021. Well, when we first bought it, it was like the height of COVID. So this place was locked down, like you couldn't even come anywhere near here. We couldn't even get anyone on the phone when we bought our property. Because I had a lot of questions about the existing utilities and different stuff like that. So, yeah, we've been there a while, sir.
Okay.
But off and on, I haven't been there for 3 years solid like they said. That's just not true.
And then you just arbitrarily realized that you needed to have a temporary use permit for your living structure and come and applied for it?
We were accidentally, I say, notified because somehow we were notified through Polk's name came to our post office box, and we got one of the letters from the county, from his office. It wasn't even addressed to us, it wasn't anything, and it was like a code compliance letter. And we talked to Lorelei in code compliance, we went through all of that, we talked to Mr. Patterson, we went over the plans, and now we're here.
Thank you.
And yes, sir,
Laura
that's,
Lively Barron for the record. I am here if you have any questions specifically in pertaining to this case.
Thank you. Does the commission have any further discussion? Is there any public comment for this matter? Okay, if there's multiple people, I ask that one person come and approach a time, and Mr. Patterson, can you let him sit there maybe? And you'll take Mr. Patterson's seat. State your name and address for the record after you make the microphone green.
Roxanne Montink, 5176 Oran Road. I have been a resident of this subdivision for many years. When the Wrights first moved into the location, it was back in 2020. According to the deed that's filed on record, it was in November of 2020. They brought in plans, and we were all excited in the subdivision to see that they were actually cleaning up the property and had hopes to build a home. However, it has been 3 years, and we have not seen any improvements other than just talk. So we keep hearing kicking the can down the road. I feel like if we continue to let this happen, that's all we're gonna see is the can kick down the road some more. I would be happy for them to build a home. I think we all would. But it's been very disappointing because this is the first, when you drive into our subdivision, it's the first home you see. And you have the cars, whether or not they're inoperable or operable, it doesn't matter. It's just one of those things that you see beautiful custom homes in our subdivision. We all take pride in our property, and so it's just disheartening to know that I'm not sure if they will ever build a house. Not that it matters either, we also have CC&R, so when they're saying they're making significant decreases in the size, I hope they're aware of the CC&R restrictions. I know the commission can't act on those, but just hold
are
on.
those county codes?
Hold
Sir,
on.
sir, she is addressing the commission. You will have your turn. No, all your comments are addressed to us.
Yes, it is.
She will not direct any questions towards you.
No.
I'll make it clear then. She is not talking to you, she is talking to us. And then if we have a question, we will ask you. You may continue.
Thank you. So we have CC&Rs in our subdivision that have size restrictions and many other restrictions. None of us have enforced that yet, and I know that would be upon the homeowners in our subdivision to enforce that. According to those CC&Rs, we could seek legal action, but we haven't done that because we do want them to proceed. I'm not hopeful anymore. I think we've been hearing the same thing for the last 3 years, and I just feel that if we continue to let this happen, it's just gonna keep on going status quo. Their temporary residence has become permanent. And I know they say that they have been in and out. I don't know if I've ever seen that RV go down the road. I don't know if I've ever seen it come out of that property. So it's become permanent. So that's all I have to say. If they proceed, good luck. But I just request the board to deny it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to public comment? Please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Troy Peak. I live at 4928 Oren Road. I just recently finished building my house right next to this property. I've owned this property for almost 2 years, and I agree with what she had just said. In the time that I've owned this property, I've never once seen that RV move. And kicking the can down the road, I feel, is what's happening. This property's become an eyesore. I bought out there because I wanted a nice area, nice place, like everywhere else, to build my place. And when I first met them, everything, all the talk of the new house and that, they approached me with it. They approached me to buy that property because they had the engineers, they said they had a set of plans. But my question is, has an engineer ever bought off on that foundation yet? Because it's sat there so long that I'm in that line of work. I'm in construction field. I deal with foundations. I deal with houses. I know that foundation is not a good foundation to build on. And I don't think an engineer will sign off on it. Now, if an architect builds a set of plans, draws a set of plans, that's one thing. An engineer has to buy off on it. So that's my question. So those are some of the questions that I have moving forward, if we can get those answered, between a realistic timeline and when they want to build. Is an engineer going to buy off on that current foundation that they can build on? We hope they build, yes, but since I've been there, I don't see anything other than an eyesore.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else with public comment? Please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Vicki Jones, and I live at 3870 Red Mountain Road, which butts up to the back end of their property. And I first want to say that the letter that was read into the record was not from everybody in that neighborhood. I certainly had no knowledge of that letter. But my concern is the fact that I bought my property, excuse me, in 2017 because it was like an upscale neighborhood. I actually cased the joint, to make sure that my investment would be upheld by the bigger homes there. So maybe I was one of those smaller homes that got in there. But we do that for value. We do that for our investment. And I did this home for my long term. I plan to die in that home. So it's built for an old person. So when you plan to live in a neighborhood forever, and then you start to drive into a neighborhood and see that there are people that aren't building when they should have been building, and they have been there for about 3 years that I know of. My concern is I want everybody to feel like the neighborhood like I feel, like it is the place that I'm gonna stay forever. So I would suggest, and I can't really make a recommendation to you, but if the Reichs have not got their building permit within 3 months, they're not gonna build in a year. Now it takes a good 7 to 12 months to get a house done. And so I would think the Planning Commission can consider tabling it for 90 days to get them to where they can bring their permits and present them and see that there is going to be progress within a year, or we're just going to be here next year saying the same things and going around the same, conversations. So I know you can do what you want to do, but I think that would kind of give them a reprieve to get their things together and get things going, or make a decision on what they need to do if it's going to be their forever home. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with public comment? None heard. Would the applicant like to speak to any of the items discussed from the public comment, knowing that the structural stability of the foundation is no concern of ours. Would you like to comment towards any of the people that spoke, but we're not talking about the structural integrity of the foundation, because that is not our department, that is the building department discussion.
Okay. Right.
Do you have anything else you'd like to comment on?
No, sir.
Thank you. Does the commission have any further discussion?
Commissioner Blakey, this is Jeff Goings for the record. To the public's concern, I would have to state this, that this is the beginning of a timeline. There has been no timeline up until this point. So if we grant this special use permit, it comes with a one-year renewal. It requires them to have all of these things in place within that period of time. Otherwise, it comes back to this board for review again. So this may be the spot where you folks want us to be, or want them to be, is the starting point. We've got to start somewhere, and then you have a timeline. And now we do have some things that we can come back on, repercussions we can then, lay down if these criteria are not met.
Zach Binder for the record. I just had one clarification, Chris. This was a code enforcement or not?
I believe it was a code enforcement, yes. Was it not?
Well, Lorelei's on the phone. I don't think it was, but she can answer.
This is Lorelei Lee Barron, code compliance official for the record. This is a code compliance enforcement case. That's how this came about.
Thank you. Do you have any further comment on this matter, Lorelei?
I can share with you that from the get-go, they have been very willing to participate in this process, to do what they need to get into compliance. They have expressed the hardships that they have had along the way to me, and we have drafted up a code compliance agreement on the other things that do not pertain to these issues to be dealt with. However, when it comes to the temporary use permit application, I do understand where neighbors' concerns lie as far as it taking a very long time to getting to this point. But I also thank you, Commissioner, for bringing up the point that this is a timeline. So I feel like this could be the beginning of that clock to get them motivated and moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Does the commission have any other questions? To the applicant, you understand that if we approve or deny, there's consequences either way. And there's requirements, if it's approved, there's requirements that have to be met. And you can communicate with the planning office to make sure that you totally understand everything that needs to happen.
He made everything clear.
Okay. Does the commission at this time ask that?
Mr. Chairman, I have Mark Hyde for the record. Because this has taken a long time, this question is to you, Chris. Would it be wise or permissible for us to put in some time frames that would be less than a year to accomplish certain things? We don't want to be a year down the road and come here and then there hasn't really been anything substantial.
No, understood. I will say, and this is really a question for Joe to answer, but I will say, I have not seen the commission approve a permit for, a first-time permit for a time less than 12 months. On a renewal, absolutely, but I think in terms of what the flexibility is of the commission, I think Joe is better to answer that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hyde, you can put conditions as far as what you want to see on your permit. The permit itself would have to be for 1 year period, which is what's set forth in the code. You could add guidelines or requirements for things to be done in a certain period of time, like building plans must be set to the building department within 3 months or something along those lines. But if it's not followed, the consequence is not really going to come up until the yearly renewal period comes, and that would be considered as evidence when you come to that hearing to say, maybe things aren't being done in the time period that we'd asked. So the enforcement procedure would not be to revoke the permit, it would just be considered as something of evidence for you to be considering.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. Based on the previously adopted, or excuse me, let me back up here. I need to get back here. Based on the information provided in the application, in the staff report from the public and all other entities heard tonight, I move that the findings have been met for conformance with the criteria found in Churchill County Code 1608070B4 regarding a temporary use permit for temporary quarters for home construction.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Goings, seconded by Commissioner Picodi, that the findings have been met to approve this temporary use permit. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I now ask for a motion for the decision, knowing that timelines of construction can be set within that decision. Would someone like to make a motion?
Paul Picodi for the record. Based on the previously adopted findings made by this project, I move to approve the temporary use permit application for Sean and Casey Reich to establish a temporary quarters for home construction 4886 Oren Road, APN 006-292-74. This approval is subject to conditions as listed in the staff report.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Picodi, seconded by Commissioner Deal. All those in favor, vote by saying aye. 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 Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. The applicant, there's a 10-day appeal period for this application, and the planning department at that time will contact you for the process that moving forward, if nothing's heard. Okay? Thank you.
And we will get a copy of the list that Christian was going over?
For the list, or are you gonna mail it?
Can you clarify what you're asking about?
He went over a list that was,
He said he had the list.
Oh, it's in the staff report. Did you get the staff report?
It's in in the copy of the staff report, listed conditions there.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are what they are. You've got them.
Thanks, Blake.
If you have any other questions, or if you want the minutes from this meeting, you can contact the planning department, and they can provide everything in writing. Okay?
Here, just hand that to him, though. That's from the building department.
Mr. Wright? It's the building department stuff.
Agenda item 9, public hearing. Item B, special use permit application for an explosion combustion testing facility filed by Palace Industries Incorporated for property located northeast of Hazen. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of this application? Please come forward. Make sure the microphone is close. Make sure it's green. State your name and business address for the record.
I'll go first. Sean Pitt, business address 737 Lairport Street, El Segundo, California.
Jacob Swears, same address.
Thank you. Director Spross, would you like to summarize this application?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Spross for the record. So this is an application for a special use permit. The use listing is explosion and combustion testing. The applicant is Palace Industries LLC. The owner is 40 Mile Desert LLC with a purchase contract by Tolis Development. The site, there's no address, but the APN is 009-291-09, which is 640 acres. The designation in the master plan is industrial, and the zoning is R20. So this property is owned by 40 Mile Desert LLC, which owned the property at the time of the application. But the property right now is under contract for purchase by Tolis Development Company. Tolis has been working with Palace Industries to lease the site for rocket testing, but if the sale falls through, a new agreement will be needed. The The facility is located in a remote location northeast of Hazen. The remote location creates challenges less remote sites do not have and requires other tasks to be completed besides this SUP. The first is a property rezone. The proposed use is listed as an explosion combustion testing in the Development Code use table, being allowed only in the industrial zoning district. Therefore, this site must be rezoned to industrial before the storage containers are in place and on-site operations begin. The second is conforming legal address. The property is located along a power transmission line that has a dirt and gravel road that is in decent shape, but its legal access is unclear and needs to be corrected as described in this report. So the project summary, the application provides a detailed description of the project. The applicant proposes this facility for developing new rocket motors and ground testing them on fixed mounting, and flight testing will take place elsewhere. The applicant indicates the largest motor being approximately a 10-inch diameter and 10 feet long and weighs around 900 pounds. Rocket fuel will be fabricated in small amounts to create the motor, which then needs time to cure. Multiple motors will be created, cured, and then tested once or twice a week. The testing will last from a few seconds to 15 seconds for larger missiles. The rocket fuel will be created on-site in small quantities and packed into the rocket motor casings. The fuel, motors, some fuel ingredients, and firing mechanisms are dangerous and are stored in modified storage containers according to federal, state, and local regulations. A fire protection report is provided with the submittal and is discussed in more detail here. The facility has two compounds that occupy roughly 5 acres. The main operations compound holds most of the activity. Separate storage units or spaces are provided for safe storage and operations, including storage of fuel ingredients, fuel mixing, motor casing filling, storage for curing of completed motors, firing mechanisms, etc. Storage units are also used for temporary employee office and washroom. The second compound is reserved for the test firing of the rocket motors. It is some distance away for safety reasons. The test mount is surrounded on the north, south, and east by a noise mitigating berm. The horizontal test will be pointed west. Other tests may be pointed upwards. Each site element is described in the submittal and shown on the site plan. The operation compounds are located between 2 roads at the south end of the very large property, which is 640 acres. One road is the Power Line Road, which provides straightforward physical access for the 4 miles or so to Hazen. The legal access for the facility is unclear. The other road separates the Power Line Road near the south property line, follows a curving 2.5-mile arc mostly through the Tolis property, and rejoins the Power Line Road. The proposed site takes access on this road a short distance from the south property line. Hours of operations are normal weekly hours plus weekends. Operations may sometimes extend to non-standard times, but it is unclear if night operations are proposed. Rocket motor testing is expected to take place about once or twice a week. The application indicates that the number of employees at the site will vary, with some days having only a couple and other days having 10 or 12 employees and visitors. Testing days are likely to have the most people. However, no permanent facilities for employees and visitors are proposed, but rather temporary facilities. I know that the applicant has got a presentation they want to show, and so I ask that maybe we go through that presentation, and then I will resume with the criteria review and the findings of the staff.
Chris, I'm not sure if there's a way for me to move the presentation forward, or?
Yes, just a minute.
Oh, do you have it?
I have something.
Yeah, sure.
So I think the arrows go forward and back at the bullseye. You can point at the screen, or used to be able to.
I don't know if any of this works anymore.
Yeah.
It moves. The mouse moves on the screen.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so you get a little mouse. It used to have a bullseye, but now it's different.
All right, so just quite quickly, due to a trademark issue, so we're a startup company, so 3 of us left SpaceX, which you all may be familiar with, is the launch company owned by Elon Musk. So I spent the past 7 years at SpaceX, and with 2 other folks from the company decided to leave in November of 2022 to address the need in the country for low-cost defense manufacturing. We see, certainly with the rise of authoritarian powers around the world, the critical nature of the U.S. to be able to develop defense hardware more quickly and more cost-effectively, as SpaceX has been able to do in the commercial space launch market. Jacob with me is the chief engineer on this project. He spent the past 10 years at SpaceX. The vast majority of the company is former SpaceX folks who worked on the launch vehicle spacecraft side of that company, but decided that this was a critical issue for us to come address. We will address the company as Castellian moving forward. So as a startup company, you encounter some issues. We encountered a trademark issue early in the company's lifetime. So we'll now be referred to as Castellian. The company will be going public in terms of exiting what's called stealth mode in the startup community as Castellian. So I will refer to the company as Castellian, and the company's legal name has been changed to Castellian as well. So just to make that note up front here. As I mentioned, 3 of us left SpaceX in late last year to develop this new company that's focused on doing defense production better. So we really take the agile hardware development practices that we developed and put in place at SpaceX to be able to support the country's effort to produce more defense systems faster and at significantly lower cost. The proposed facility that Chris was referring to is a solid rocket motor development facility. One of the key capabilities that the United States has fallen behind China and Russia in particular is hypersonic flight capabilities. What we're proposing here is a solid rocket motor developed facility that we will subsequently use in low-cost hypersonic flight testing that will be available to the Department of Defense and to other scientific entities throughout the country. We would intend to employ both manufacturing technicians and aerospace engineering talents at this facility here in Churchill. The motors designed and built here at the facility in Churchill County would be used for internal development only. We're not seeking to sell the motors built at this site, but to use them in our own vehicles for these hypersonic flight tests that I referred to earlier. We've chosen a quite rural site, as Chris referred to, in coordination with Tolles Development, in particular to ensure that our presence in the county, if approved, will cause minimum to no nuisance for the neighbors that are here. Obviously, it's not our intention to, rocket testing is loud and sounds scary, we can understand, but this is something we know quite well and know how to take sufficient mitigating actions to ensure that the community is not adversely affected by our presence in the community. I referred to this low-cost hypersonic test flight capability, so this is an example of the type of systems that would be developed. The motor is the back end of the vehicle there. That sort of 10 feet is a representative motor length and 10-inch in diameter. This is something that would be capable of flying off F-18. Obviously, NAS Fallon is here, so you'll be familiar with seeing those planes flying overhead. There are 3 sort of sizes of vehicles that we'd be testing at this facility. One would be a 1-pound motor. I've got an image of what that looks like. This is like a fireworks size ground testing. So we hold it down in a metal compartment, and we basically test the performance of that fuel inside of that vehicle. The next is about 50 pounds of propellant. I've got a picture as well of what that looks like in the ground testing, and then a full 1.0 motor, which is what you're looking at there. So that type of vehicle will be capable of hitting hypersonic velocity during ascent, which is more than 5 times the speed of sound. As Chris mentioned, no flight testing would take place at this site, so you're able to do flight testing under a flight waiver through the FAA at several sites that are more remote, some in Nevada and some in California. In the future, we would also look at federal ranges like Vandenberg Space Force Base that we launched out of from SpaceX as well. The propellant formulation is something called APCP, so this is a very standard solid rocket motor propellant that's been in use for over 70 years. the key development that our company Castellan is intending to bring is low-cost, high-rate production in the future. Chris mentioned that the initial infrastructure here is based on a shipping container design. One of the things we're demonstrating to our Department of Defense customers are the capability to establish a manufacturing facility very quickly for these type of capabilities, where historically these have been, major capital expenditures to be able to produce solid rocket propellants. For the type of conflicts that are arising, it is important to be able to establish new manufacturing capabilities quickly as we move forward. We'll address this as we proceed through this presentation, but the exact final motor length and diameter will fluctuate as we look to optimize the vehicle design. I'll address that a bit more. Just to give you a size comparison, so on the left side, you see there NASA sounding rockets. So these are not like the space shuttle or anything like that. These are the smallest rockets that NASA launches to do things like weather evaluations or test other sensors. The Castellan 1.0 vehicle that we reference would be much smaller even than the smallest vehicles that are launched by the federal government. The image on the right gives you a sense of that largest vehicle. The Castellan 1.0 vehicle would be on that order of magnitude in terms of size. So we're not talking about space shuttle side boosters or any large vehicle. This is really quite a small vehicle we're working on. Chris addressed this. This is the parcel. You can see Hazen in the bottom left portion of the image on the left there, and then the depiction of the proposed 5-acre space that would be in use there on the right. Just for reference to key points, the location is about 4.5 miles to Hazen, about 1 mile to the small nearby wetlands, and 1.32 miles to the railroad tracks and larger wetland area. So this is the site layout that Chris was referring to with the two main areas. So on the left there, you see shipping container-based infrastructure. So there's, I think that's 5 40-foot shipping containers and 4 20-foot shipping containers that would store the materials in accordance with federal, state, and local regulations. And then on the right, you see the motor firing test stand. So the vehicle is pointed toward the west, which is where that mountain range is, pointing away from the closest wetlands, railroad tracks, et cetera. And then there's a noise mitigation berm surrounding the test facility to further mitigate the noise generated by these motor tests. This is a picture inside the mixing cast area. So to produce solid rocket propellant, you need to mix the input materials together and then vacuum cast them into solid propellant grains. The grains are about the size of a 5-gallon bucket. And then on the right, the image is actually where Jacob and I were yesterday. We're currently using a temporary facility right near Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. And that's what the shipping containers literally look like. They're closer together here than they would be at the proposed facility in Churchill, but this gives you a sense of the operations. On the far left there, you can see the 1-pound grain. So Chris referred to testing both horizontally and vertically. This would be the only vertical test that would occur. So you can see it's quite a tiny amount of smoke and sound. Like I said, this is like a small firework even level of smoke and sound. The center and right image are of the grain tester for the 55-pound of propellant motor. You can see here an example of what that test stand looks like at the facility, temporary facility we're using in California. The test stand will be a concrete pad. In the case of this California site, no berm was requested or necessary, so there's no noise mitigation required at that site we're using temporarily. And then you can see what the flame looks like. That test actually occurred just last night, so Jacob and I are pretty excited with the progress and to be able to share that image with you all today. So that gives you a good sense of what the testing physically looks like and what the infrastructure would look like. Of course, there are a few deviations to ensure minimum nuisance to the folks here in the county. We're working with 3 engineering companies. One is called Team ACS, that's a fire engineering consultancy, Team UES, which is environmental engineering firm, and Kimley Horn, which is a traditional engineering firm in support of this project. We've had discussions with local fire marshal and sheriff, and will ensure their approval of our fire protection plan and emergency response plan, particularly to make sure that everyone's safe, and also to make sure that they know where any of the hazardous materials are on site, and that a close coordination would be in place to respond to any incidents at the site. The facility will be surrounded by high security fence, and we'll have 24/7 security monitoring. We've already discussed this at length with fire marshal and sheriff. In addition, as I mentioned previously, we're well aware of the laws around these type of activities and will comply as required. In general, we found the staff report that was submitted as part of this hearing today quite reasonable, and we're happy to agree to those terms in the effort to be a good neighbor here, assuming that you're willing to support this special use permit. The one deviation that was requested that I alluded to earlier is the physical size of the motor is actually kind of irrelevant for the purposes of what type of noise or exhaust is made. The thing that you all should actually care about is how much propellant exists. So whether it's coming out of a slightly larger tube or slightly longer tube, it doesn't really matter. What matters is the amount of propellant that exists. So we just request that if the special use permit is approved, that the current condition 6B is altered to exclusively address a 1,000-pound limit on the amount of propellant, not the size of the vehicle, which we want to be able to alter to have optimum performance for this type of system. That's all I've got.
Would you like, do you
All
want
right,
to
Chris Ross
continue
for
with
the record.
yours?
Sorry.
Or do you want to have us discuss this at all? or
I
just wanna-
wanted to go through the criteria first, so you heard everything, and I think that will prompt some considerable discussion. So I wanted to get that out to you guys first. So the criteria review, there's several criteria that need to be you need to be mindful of. So the first is this compatible with the existing surrounding land uses and development? So the surrounding land uses are predominantly vacant desert land. The lack of other uses makes this proposal generally compatible with surrounding uses and development. However, the applicant only controls 5 acres, which roughly corresponds to the area of the compounds. If this property should develop in the future, other uses could be placed right next to these compounds, which would be unsafe and incompatible and would place the burden of separation on the other users. So with that being said, the staff recommends that the applicant be required to hold control of at least 20 acres surrounding the facility through lease or purchase. Number 2, is this in substantial conformance with the master plan and policies and will be constructed and operated in full compliance of this code? The proposed use is an explosion combustion test facility. This use is prohibited in the RR20 zone, so it cannot operate until the property is rezoned to industrial. And the applicant has been made aware of that and are proceeding with that depending on the outcome of this hearing today. So the proposed development must conform to the county development code. So with respect to height and setbacks and easements, the power transmission line has a 40-foot easement centered on the power line, and the facilities are about 300 feet away from it. We did receive comment back from NV Energy. We requested comment, and they replied with, "Thanks for the follow-up on this item. Our team has reviewed the possible impacts of the testing facility and don't believe there will be any adverse impacts on our existing power line." And that was a concern from the county with regards to exhaust and some of the chemical compounds in that exhaust, but NV Energy has deemed that to be safe. There are friction zones. Explosion and combustion testing is subject to the friction zone standard that establishes a half-mile setback from the main highway for certain uses, and this project exceeds that requirement. The legal and physical access, which was discussed earlier, The physical access means a road that at a minimum meets fire truck accessibility standards, generally being 20 feet wide driving surface that has a gravel or better surface and is capable of providing an all-weather or a wet weather access for heavy fire trucks. The physical access for this site would be the power transmission road, which generally meets the above requirements, except there are some places, a dozen or so, that have some water damage or drainage problems that may impede fire truck access. So staff recommends that the applicant work with the road supervisor to inventory these places and determine a solution for correcting them. Legal access means a continuous chain of easements reaching to a publicly maintained road. The lack of legal access is the primary reason no development takes place in the area north of Hazen and as well as other parts of the county. The best option is to approach other private property owners to add road access adjacent to the transmission line route. Staff recommends this be accomplished within 6 months. Providing time to do so is acceptable since the site is mainly developed with removable portable facilities that can easily be removed in a worst-case scenario. And I do know that the current property owner is in contact with some of the other, there's 2 other private parties, and they're in contact with them to establish some easements to maintain full legal access. So the office, sewer, and water facilities, the project is proposing to forego a water well and septic system in place of all temporary facilities. These will be in a storage container modified for the use. Sites that have employees and/or visitors present during the workday must have permanent restroom facilities, and they must be ADA accessible, including parking space and a ramp to the office. The restrooms will need to be commercial septic system that is approved by the state, approved by the state to dispose of waste. A water source must be provided for the bathroom operations. A well would be best, though tank options, if they are freeze-proof, are available. Staff recommends that a commercial coach with a combined restroom and office be used. A recommended condition is that the permanent facilities be installed within 6 months, during which time temporary facilities can be used during the state permitting delays and construction times. There's outdoor storage requirements. Shipping containers have limits on the number that can be placed on a site. Industrial zone properties are limited to 1 per acre. After the property is rezoned, it could have up to 640 storage containers or equivalent. Staff recommends that no placement of storage container structures, which are also the operations facilities, be allowed until the property is rezoned. There's parking and loading requirements. The parking code, including the handicap parking, requires parking for business and similar uses. Parking code considers the proposed use to be manufacturing, which is the closest comparable use, which requires 1 parking space per employee and 5 for visitors. The application proposes 9 spaces outside of the compound fence, though it also has plenty of space nearby and inside the compound fence. The director has determined that the proposed parking is adequate. The building department comments note that an accessible path, which is hard surfaced from the ADA parking space to the restroom or office, needs to be provided, and that ADA parking space can be placed next to the restroom if desired. There's landscaping requirements. Landscaping code requires 1 tree per 15 parking spaces and a landscaped strip along public roads. However, this site is very remote from people and not on standard roads, making the landscaping requirement pointless. The planning director is recommending that the surrounding extensive desert lands are adequate for the landscaping purposes. There's signage and lighting requirements. The application indicates no signage and no outside lighting. If there is lighting, any lighting installed must be dark skies compatible, with light shining downward rather than horizontally or upward. Another criteria or finding. Number 3, the project will be constructed and operated in a manner that will not overburden public services and infrastructure. There's no public sewer and water services available near the site. The main concern for a rocket testing facility is the burden placed on fire and police service. The application includes a fire protection plan, and discussions with the fire department indicate they are generally satisfied with the plan, though they want it to be supplemented so that regulations cited are accompanied by a proposed action to meet the regulation. In addition, they would like to coordinate training-related special situations for the facility and consider the use of a knockbox key access, consider need for water tanks for firefighting, etc. The staff recommends the plan be updated and maintained as deemed necessary by the fire department now and in the future. And staff also recommends that the road access and maintenance issues raised in this staff report be included in the fire protection plan. Security will be provided with locks, cameras, and security monitoring and response. Discussions with the sheriff raised concerns with the security methods, especially related to armed security response and accidental conflicts with emergency responders. Staff recommends developing and updating an emergency response plan as deemed necessary by the sheriff and the fire department to address all issues now and in the future. Because of the uncertainty of fully understanding the consequences of a facility like this, staff recommends that the county reserve the right to require modifications to the facility for specific issues, such as improvements to the sound barrier, increasing the area of control of land surrounding the facility, establishing to weather limits on testing, requiring mitigation of exhaust impacts on transmission lines, and requiring alteration to the access road or its closure practices during testing. Number 4, adequately mitigates the road and traffic impacts generated by the construction and build-out of the project. There's no publicly maintained roads in this area. Access roads to remote lands in the valley do exist. One of these is a pretty good road that will be used to access the site, which is the power transmission road. A second road provides access to the testing facility, splitting from the transmission line road at the south of the property line, passing through the property along the curving line of a steeper slope. This road does not have any known access easements, but can serve development within the property. It may need to be blocked off during rocket testing since motors will be pointed directly at it. The amount of traffic generated by the facility will be small, and some carpooling is likely to reduce traffic somewhat, especially on testing days. On some days, total trips might equal 1 visit, which is 2 trips, or may only be 6 or less, while other days there might be 20 trips or so. A commercial industrial operation should be responsible for road maintenance of the road it uses. This will mitigate those traffic impacts. Number 5, this project does not create adverse environmental impacts, including but not limited to noise, glare, fumes, and odor that may be detrimental to either public health, public safety, or general welfare of the persons or property in the vicinity, or the wildlife and or natural resources. So the potential environmental impact issues are as follows. The loud rocket testing noise. It can impact residents in the Hazen area and animals in the wetland to the east. The application provides a discussion of noise, including tables of noise generated by rockets compared to noises from other activities. The noise table in the application is a bit different from the numbers in similar tables found on the internet. These indicates that rockets, probably the larger ones, are about 180 decibels and a shotgun is about 160 decibels. Rocket noise will be very sudden, will last for up to 15 seconds, and happen multiple times on testing days. The application proposes a noise berm to reduce rocket noise to the north, south, east, and east. Earthen berms are very solid and good at blocking sound. At a distance of a half mile where the nearest wetland is, the noise is reduced from about 100 decibels to 75 decibels. At 1 mile where the main wetland is, the noise reduced from 90 decibels to about 68 decibels. At 4 miles where the Hazen town site is, the noise is reduced from about 77 decibels to 56 decibels. The size of the earthen berm is not stated in the application, but staff recommends that it be at least 6 feet high. The other environmental impact is a rocket exhaust. The rocket exhaust contains chemicals that are listed in this application. One of those chemicals is HCl, or hydrochloric acid, which is a strong acid comprising 23% of the exhaust. Acids can corrode materials exposed to them. The rocket motors will mainly be pointed west when firing, placing the initial plume west of the rocket mount. This location lies about 750 feet from the power transmission main. As long as winds are not strong, the plume should be dispersed or elevated before reaching the power lines. As stated, NV Energy has been consulted and does not anticipate problems with the facility. While weather limits on testing are not being recommended, future problems could result in their being needed. Another issue related to rocket exhaust is that the plume will extend into the air, possibly affecting aviation flights, including NAS Fallon. Activity affecting flights could be subject to FAA requirements, and they may need coordination with NAS Fallon. Recommended conditions would be requiring conforming to requirements and communication with NAS Fallon. It is not clear if there's rocket testing at night, if it's planned, but if so, it will be very visible and can cause confusion for the traveling public or attract sightseers to the facility. So staff recommends prohibiting any testing after sunset. The rocket motor building requires the handling of hazardous and dangerous substances. The application describes very careful storage and accompanied by proposed actions to meet those regulations. In addition, they would like to coordinate training related to special situations for the facility. Hold on a second. That didn't make sense. So, the application describes very careful storage and handling of these substances. The fire marshal is satisfied that the applicant can safely manage these substances, so no additional mitigation is required. We did receive a letter from the building department. I will not read this into the record, but I will give the applicant a copy of this so they're aware of the requirements from the building department. After spending extensive time with the applicant and researching various forms, various media, the staff recommendation is approval with the following conditions. 1, the placement of the storage containers and facility operations are prohibited until the property has been rezoned to industrial. Grading, ground surfacing, concrete work, and fence building may proceed before approval of the rezone. This permit is subject to review by the Planning Commission in 6 months for compliance with conditions of approval and code requirements. Thereafter, review shall be conducted annually from the date of approval until such time as the Planning Commission deems that they are not needed. Within 6 months of the permit approval, legal and physical access shall be obtained and documentation provided to the director. And also, a permanent restroom and office shall be provided at the facility that meets building code and state law requirements. This includes any commercial septic system installation. This does not prevent the building official from implementing certificate of occupancy requirements. Within 3 months, if the transmission line road is used for access, places with questionable passage for fire trucks and wet weather shall be improved. If improvements are not completed on time, facility operations shall cease until completed. Before improvements are made, the applicant shall consult with the road supervisor and fire marshal to inventory the places needing correction and determine solutions. 5, the facility operator is responsible for maintaining the road from Hazen to the site in a condition passable for fire trucks as determined by the fire department. 6, creation and testing of rockets is limited to ground testing only. Flight testing is prohibited. 6B, which is what was mentioned in the presentation, which the applicant would like to change. The size limits of rockets, 12 inches in diameter or 1,000 pounds or a 12-foot length. Rocket motor testing on no more than 8 days per month, and no rocket motor testing after sunset. Number 7, the operator shall obtain and maintain an area of control around the facility, such as by lease or sale equal to or greater than 20 acres. Before operation begins, documentation of a lease or authorization with the current property owner that also shows the area of control around the facility shall be provided to the director. The property owner shall record a road easement along the power transmission line that is acceptable to the county. The proposed noise mitigation berm shall be installed. The berm shall be at least 6 feet high. And the building department authorization shall be completed to the satisfaction of the building official, including but not limited to the ADA accessible parking space, ADA accessibility improvements, restroom, and office. I'm just about done. The fire protection plan shall be updated as determined by the fire marshal and implemented on a time schedule determined by the fire marshal. The fire marshal may update the plan and its implementation schedule as deemed necessary. An emergency response plan shall be developed to address issues and implementation schedules deemed necessary by the sheriff and the fire department. Plan shall be updated as deemed necessary by the sheriff and the fire department. The county reserves the right to require modifications to the facility for specific issues. As mentioned, improvements to the sound barrier, increasing the area of control of land surrounding facility, establishing 2 weather limits on testing, requiring mitigation of exhaust impacts on the transmission lines, and require alteration to the access road or its closure practices during testing. All federal, state, and local permits required for this facility shall be obtained and maintained, including any needed for safe aviation over the site. The facility shall coordinate with NAS Fallon regarding impacts of testing plumes on Navy operations and shall implement any recommendations. Operations shall be conducted in a manner that does not create a nuisance, whether public or private, under Nevada law or Churchill County Code. And with that, I'm sure you have questions.
Thank you. Does the applicant understand the conditions of this application and the approval of it? Or-
Yes, if I may clarify a few points, if that's all right?
Yes?
Just to give some characterization to the sound decibel data points that he provided. So the nearby wetlands about a mile away, he talked about 70 decibels. That's on the order of your like washing machine in your house. And then for 4.5 miles, 56 decibels. That's like a quiet conversation or quiet neighborhood street. So the location was specifically selected to be far enough away from major residences so that it's no impact. Again, the testing occurs for an order of 15 seconds or less as well. The other point is related to the overflight. We're more than happy to coordinate with NAS Fallon. The rocket plume only goes up about 100 or 150 feet, even in wind. As I mentioned, the site we're using now is right in the air path of Edwards Air Force Base, where they're doing flight tests all the time. It's not an issue at all, but we're happy to coordinate with NAS Fallon.
Thank you. Does any of the commission have any questions or discussion for the applicant?
Paul Picotti for the record. I have a series of questions for you, and a couple of them you've mostly answered specific to the aviation requirements for NAS Fallon. First, yeah, I'm taking a look at this from the community's perspective, right? You guys wanted to do it out here, far away from everything, so what would be like our worst case scenario in terms of like blast radius? If something were to happen at that facility, what is the worst impact to that surrounding area? If something were to go catastrophically wrong with everything there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll turn it over to Jacob here.
So the fuel we make is a deflagrant, not a, sorry, can you hear me? Is that better?
Just pull the microphone up. There you go.
The fuel we use is a deflagrant, not an explosive. So it doesn't necessarily detonate. It's more like a 3,000 PSI gas tank, like compressed nitrogen. So were there to be a failure in the motor, it would be like venting a propane tank, not like setting off a bomb. We don't use 1.1 or 1.2 explosive material, so it's much more like a 3,000 PSI vent than a detonation.
Okay, and
I can just also add, the total amount of material that we're storing at the site is quite small. Obviously, we're talking about low-level R&D facility able to be stored in shipping containers. So we're not talking about a massive facility with a huge amount of hazardous materials or anything like this.
Okay, so that does, I think, mostly answer my next question. I'm sure you guys are somewhat familiar with like HERO conditions for electromagnetic activity in the area, and the power lines being right there. Is that going to be any concern if there is a power spike, sparking, arcing, or anything from any of the aviation assets that we have here, in Fallon?
We specifically store everything in metal containers that are shielded to protect from lightning, so that everything is stored completely surrounded in a Faraday cage, so that you could get the shielding. The shipping container could be struck by lightning, which is going to be a much higher amount of energy than anything that could radiate off the power line or radiate from an aircraft.
Okay. That answers most of my next question also that I had here was you know, we have seismic activity in the area and very high temperatures. You know, everything's going to be boxed up. Is that going to be a concern for any kind of, you know, inadvertent detonation?
So we have to design the motors to be stored on aircraft carriers and carried on planes, and those planes operate from the Arctic to Iraq. So the propellant's actually quite stable all the way up to about 160 Fahrenheit, and then all the way down to about -30. So it's very, very temperature stable. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. My last question. The aviation assets out at Fallon typically, you know, reach an altitude that I understand isn't going to be an issue. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but that area is a direct training area for our small airport that we have here in Fallon. So all of our training flights leave, you know, the Fallon airport and go directly over that spot. Are you guys, in the past, have you guys in a facility like this, have you had a need for any kind of TFR to, you know, limit the access to aviation in that area? Because
No, as I mentioned, the exhaust plume is, one, dissipates very quickly, and it doesn't go high enough to really impact aviation. The only activity that we engage in that requires a TFR is the flight testing, which again, we're not proposing at this site. So the flight testing, of course, you're then entering into the corridor for aircraft, so they will block off space for flight testing, but certainly not for this ground testing.
And would you guys be willing to just contact the FSDO? I know the Navy's one asset, but the FSDO is really going to be the deciding factor for that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. I have several questions. First of all, though, I want to make maybe a correction or add to the recommended conditions. I think what you were concerned about is not the size of the rocket, but how many pounds of propellant. And so I'm wondering in the conditions if that's something that, I guess that's something we as a commission could add. What you're asking for is 1,000 pounds maximum of propellant, right?
Right, that's right. And it's just to say that we also think the only thing that you should care about is the amount of propellant, because that's
Right.
what makes the sound and noise.
Right, because under 6, under the recommended conditions, 6B is the size of the rockets of 12 inches diameter, 1,000 pounds, or 12 foot in length. But if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're asking for is 1,000 pounds maximum of
propellant, yeah.
propellant.
Yeah, so when we refer to the motors in this presentation, we're talking about propellant the whole time. That may have been a miscommunication between us and the planning department. We were talking about the amount of propellant, and I think it came across as the total mass of the motor, but it is the amount of propellant that we're referring to.
Okay, comment, there's some questions, and that is, I really enjoyed how thorough your application is. I mean, you've really addressed a lot of issues, and so it's a pleasure to be on the commission and look at something that's really been thought about. But I have about 14 questions. No, I have a couple questions. You talk about a phase 1 environmental study and a phase 2 after.
Right.
Why not do the phase 2 now? We know enough about it. You're working with environmental, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, principally, phase 1 is saying this is what it's before we start, and phase 2 is after. But you have enough information that you could conduct a phase 2 now. I mean, you could address all the questions that a phase 2 environmental study raises.
If I think what you're referring to, our plan is to do a phase 2 study to ensure that we haven't contaminated anything when we
Right.
leave. So we could do that before we get there, but that doesn't verify that we haven't necessarily
No, I know.
caused any issues.
Basically, what I'm asking is how thorough are we looking at environmental study, at the environmental study?
So the phase 1 basically is to set a baseline for the property owner, to show what the conditions are prior to our move-in, and the subsequent is to show that we haven't contaminated the site. We have retained Team UES, as I mentioned, as an environmental consultant for the group. We are far below the exhaust limits that are required for permitting in the state. So due to the incredibly small amount of materials that we're working with and the materials that they are, we've closely evaluated NDEP and CAPP's requirements for accident prevention and for the amount of materials required in permitting in the state. We're far less than half of the lowest permitting requirement
Okay.
of materials or exhaust.
Okay, that's good. Just let me ask a couple of these questions that I've written down. So I'm looking at what is the expected duration of the combustion testing and how frequently will be conducted? We have in your report how long one test lasts. So could you just address that for us?
Sure. So typically, like I mentioned, the longest that a single test would last 15 seconds. For those motors, the most we would test is several per day on testing days. Again, the staff report recommends 8 times per month. 8 testing days per month, that would be more than sufficient. So you're looking at maybe 30, 45 seconds on each of those 8 days.
Okay. Another question is, how will you communicate and provide updates to the community regarding the progress and schedule of combustion testing activities?
So our discussions with the sheriff and the fire marshal will be to notify them ahead of time that these tests are to occur. In particular, they express concerns about folks calling in smoke or other things in the desert, and we want to make sure that the community's resources are not used unnecessarily to respond to what is not an emergency activity. So our intention would be to notify the sheriff and the fire marshal prior to any testing, so they're aware of what's going on and aren't wasting community resources.
Great. Last question, what steps will be taken to monitor and measure the air quality and emissions during the combustion testing? And will this data be made available to the public for transparency purposes?
We can make that data available. We monitor the amount of propellant consumed, and based on the amount of propellant and the combustion properties, we can calculate very precisely how much was produced. And then we use that data to inform what our emissions actually were. And we already are planning on providing the information on how much propellant is produced to the fire chief so that they know what is stored where. So that data will be available, and we can make that available if necessary.
Okay. And then just how long is that berm?
You can read it up there.
I couldn't see it. I couldn't see the length of it. I couldn't see it. in the
Well,
report.
to give you a sense of scale, that red box there would be a 20-foot shipping container.
No, I'm talking about the berm.
Yeah, but I can't remember offhand,
Oh,
so
you're
to give you a
saying
visual
that's- oh, I
sense.
got you.
Yeah.
That red box.
That's
is
as a
20 foot.
reference.
Yeah, that's a reference right
Oh,
there.
okay.
Looks like 100 feet long and 60 feet wide. Yeah, 60 feet on the horizontal and 100 feet on the vertical, with respect to the image on the screen.
I imagine that rocket shoots pretty straight, right? It's not going to go higher than 6 feet.
Oh, no. We will not move at all up and
Yeah,
down
it's just
in
going to
this
go
direction.
like a bullet.
Yeah, if you, I don't know if I can go
3
back to the
times the
presentation or
sound
not.
of-
You saw it. It goes very
Right.
straight.
Okay, thank you very much.
I want a point of clarification. So back to this 6B, or I think it was 6B, I'm trying to even remember now. Anyway, your concern is that you needed 1,000 pounds of propellant. The size of the rocket could vary between a 10-inch. How big would you go? Up to a 16, 18? Is this something that needs to be addressed now, as I guess is what I'm saying?
Well, again, our perspective on the matter is that, the physical size is truly irrelevant for your purposes, of course. The largest we would conceivably go is maybe 212 inches.
212 inches in length, and then the largest.
I'm
the
more
largest-
concerned about diameter, because I think that's what this one is stating, is a 12-foot long, 12-inch round, 1,000-pound propellant. What you're stating, I think what you were stating is that could be, that could grow. It could be longer, it could be larger in diameter, but the propellant will not change.
Yes, sir, that is accurate. The largest diameter vehicle I suspect we will ever make in the future is 36 inches in diameter. I think in the next few years it will likely be 24. But to make a 36-inch diameter vehicle, it would probably be on the order of 2 feet long to have about 1,000 pounds of propellant in it. So the larger it gets, the shorter it would necessarily need to be. And that really is just a trade on what altitude you're flying at for the performance that you achieve.
And again, I think more what I'm trying to eliminate here is a potential for them to have to come back and redo this. If we stop at the 1,000 pounds of propellant, give them the leeway in their rocket size.
When you guys decide to make your decision, and for the sake of argument, let's say it's an approval, you can modify that condition to take out the diameter and take out the length and just limit the 1,000 pounds. The applicant is aware that anytime they want to go over 1,000 pounds, they would be back in front of this commission, either amending this SUP or asking for a new one. And we have spoken with the fire marshal with regards to the quantity or the weight of the propellant per se, and he was fine with 1,000 pounds.
Was based on your initial presentation, that was something I gathered right off the bat is okay, we're limiting you, but if we're limiting you to the amount of propellant, let's not limit you to the size of the rocket.
That's right.
So you would just have to make that change in the motion. Yeah, and we've researched it and we're fine with that as well.
Mr. Chair, if I could ask one question. You guys are talking about limiting the mass of the propellant. I've looked through the conditions and maybe it's just I haven't seen it. Is there any limitations on the propellant itself being the ACPC that you have, I guess, discussed? And would there be any objection to limiting it to be just that propellant? Otherwise, I could see, 1,000 pounds of a completely different propellant would be a significantly different issue.
It's certainly our intention to use the APCP. I'll let Jacob kick me or make his statement if he's thinking about other things. The important element there is, I think, the cover of that we will comply with all state, federal, and local regulations. If we were to move to, let's say, a more exotic chemistry for a propellant in the future, we would still be doing so in compliance with those laws that are governing those type of rules. I'll let Jacob address if he's intending to use anything other than APCP, but in general, I think the county and the community is covered in that these activities are well-known and heavily regulated, as you can imagine. So with the requirement that we're still complying with the other laws governing these type of activities, I think the community would still be protected even if we were to use something other than APCP.
So, just one second. So, Joe, if I'm understanding you correctly, are you looking at having a condition that says you are limited to 1,000 pounds of propellant, regardless of whether it's ACPC or whatever it is, or this kind of propellant, so that you don't end up with 9 different propellants and you've got 9,000 pounds of propellant on site? Is that where you were going, Mr. Sanford?
That's part of where I was going, but mostly I was just going that if we limit it to 1,000 pounds on the basis that, the APCP propellant has certain properties, and that 1,000 pounds with those properties, we're all comfortable with what that would mean. But if you change to a completely different propellant, considering one with a much higher energy density or something like that, that could have a completely different look for the county. And so if we're limiting it based off 1,000 pounds, which makes sense to me, and we limit it to that propellant, it makes sense. Maybe you guys might have a better word for it than what I would think of, maybe a APCP or similar type of propellant that we could limit it, that would make sense, so that we're not leaving it to 1,000 pounds of whatever you want.
So I think the way that I would regulate that is by saying 1,000 pounds of 1.3 propellant, because that's a deflagrant and not necessarily an explosive. Like I could do 1,000 pounds of nitroglycerin, but that's not a 1.3. The other thing is we have in our fire plan, we have to get approval from the state fire marshal for what is stored where, depending on the materials. And there are regulations that cover how much perchlorate we can store and how much fuel we can store, and we have to comply with those and notify the fire marshal of those. So if we want to store a material that is outside of that approval, we then have to go through that process with the fire marshal, and they then have to be okay with it. The other thing is the type of those propellants are heavily regulated by the ATF. And so if we were to deviate from APCP, we then need ATF permitting to do so. So APCP actually has a specific exemption to not require ATF permitting. Any change from that would then require an ATF license to make those changes. We will have an ATF license anyway, but it is very heavily regulated to shift between those things.
So if I understand you correctly, if we were to actually throw, what is a 103?
Those are the types of different explosives. So,
Okay.
so you have a very high explosives is 1.1, a blasting agent is 1.2, 1.3 is a deflagrant, so it burns, it does not detonate.
Okay.
And then a 1.4 is basically explosives that you can mail.
Okay, so if we were to limit this to 1,000 pounds of 1.3, whether that is the ACPC or whether it's some version of that, it would fit into what your plan is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Is there any further discussion from the commission? Director Spross, do you have any further?
I do not. Thank you.
Does the applicant like to add anything?
No, I just thank Dean and Chris for their support through this process. They've been very willing to work with us and try to help us come into the community. So we hope to be approved and to be a good part of the community.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on this matter? Please come forward. Mr. Patterson will give you his chair. State your name and address for the record.
I'm Nona McFarland. I live at 6500 Workman Road. And I own some property, and I appreciate that I got the notice about this going out there. I don't know of how many of you ever spend time out in that area, but for probably 40 years I've gone out there. And I own some other property further to the east from there, 80 acres. And it's like the Wild Wild West, because people think that just because it's open, nobody owns property out there, because a lot of it isn't fenced. And the roads, a lot of them that are there are made by four-wheelers and SUVs, and they go right through my property because it isn't fenced. And my property does butt up to that pole line road. And if you go out there in the wintertime, and to say that that's an accessible road, I think is an understatement, because it's a combination of like clay, and it has like volcanic rock, and that road washes out, and it is not maintained. And I know that they've talked to the fire department, and I appreciate that, but I'm going to just give you an instance. My husband and I, on the 263 acres we own, there has a lot of tules. So, and water runs under the railroad track and part of our property. So we thought we would burn the tules. And we did not realize what that was like, but it's like setting a barrel of gas on fire, and it shot up, and we thought it was going to burn the railroad track and the power line. And we called the fire department. They could not get to us because that road was that bad. And there isn't roads that go to a lot of the property out there. The other problem you have is that you can have, like, the 80 acres is fenced. I can't even begin to tell you how many times people cut our fences. We got gates. They literally run through the gates and damage the gates. We have to repair them all the time. And the people that go out there shooting, it's a shooting range just because they think it's a wide open area. And one of my questions was about the security of how that was going to be fenced. and if people were gonna, they were gonna have some kind of guard people there, because if you don't, I'm telling you, you're gonna look for those kinds of problems, and you can call the sheriff's department, and by the time they get there, whoever's out there will be gone. So I have issues about that kind of stuff, and I'm listening, and I have no knowledge of what you're talking about with this fuel. But there was another business that was allowed to be developed in this county, and I'm glad this is way out in the desert, because this other company was just off of maybe a mile, if that, off of the main highway. And 2 or 3 times there has been a fire there, but our fire department cannot go in there because they don't have what it takes to put that fire out. They've had to call the military people to come in and fly with some kind of foam to help put it out. So I don't know if that would be the type of thing that is out there. And the other part that concerns me is that when I was a kid, my dad was born on 4th of July, and we always had fireworks, and he had a rocket display, and one of them went awry, and by the time we got it under control, we had like 6 acres of pasture and almost an old pump gas tank exploded. Everybody was running to put it out. So that area out there is just prime for that kind of a thing to happen. And when we first moved to where I live now, used to be a lot of planes that flew, and then for whatever reason,
Ma'am, you have 30 seconds.
oh, there was nothing.
30 seconds.
Pardon me?
You have 30 seconds left.
Okay. But now, when I hear about the practice flights from the small airport, on a daily basis, I have jets fly and helicopters that fly so low over my house I can see the pilots and the number on the helicopters, and they do fly right over that area. So those are my concerns.
Thank you. Sir, would you like to make a comment? Yes, sir. Okay, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Matt McFarland. I live at 6500 Workman Road. I appreciate your presentation. That was pretty impressive. The questions I had was power. How do they plan on getting power out there? Because that's I don't know whether it's a transmission or a commuter line, which one you can and can't pull off of, was power. You answered, because I do a lot of duck and goose hunting on that property. The noise was a concern. You cleared that up for me. And the road. I travel that road all the time, and it is pretty bad. It gets that bug dust, that white powder bug dust. Then when it rains, you're talking deep mud. Then it gets in big pockets. They feel full of water. So I don't know what kind of vehicles you guys got for travel and that, but probably better have good tires. That's all I can say. But what other one did I have? The noise, because I do have people hunt my property, members that hunt there. So that was another concern of like ducks coming in, and what time of the hour do you guys normally test from? Am I allowed to talk to these guys or no? You guys, okay.
Talk to us and then we'll let them rebut.
Okay, just the hours of whatever, because normally in the mornings is your best hunting and evening time. So, which I don't think the noise, we got 2 places we hunt. The other one's quite a ways away, so I don't think it'd affect that, but that was my only concerns, was the power, the road, and the hunting. That's it.
All right, thank you, sir,
Thank
for
you.
your time. Is there any other public comment? None heard. Would you like to speak to some of the concerns of the public, security concerns, power, roadway, noise, and hours of operation?
Sure, I'll let Jacob address the power one here shortly, but obviously we're familiar with the security concerns that would be associated with a quite rural site, remote site like this. It's something that we are dealing with currently with a remote site that we're operating out of with 24/7 security. As I mentioned, we've been working intentionally and quite closely with the sheriff. You know, we've explored a 24/7 security, armed security response from our side. The sheriff has so far requested that that the sheriff's department be the only armed response to ensure no blue-on-blue contact in the event of any situation. I would also note that the propellant and motor cases that we're preparing, Jacob alluded to, obviously needing to survive on a aircraft carrier or airplane wing. Part of that is the motors need to be exposed to insensitive munitions testing, which means the motors must be robust to being shot without going off for use in a DoD situation. So this is something that the motors themselves are actually robust to. Obviously, we know folks are out there shooting. We'll take adequate measures to secure the facility and work closely with the sheriff to address it, but we do recognize that it's a quite remote area and need to take extra precautions as a result. Let's see, with respect to the road issue, we've driven quite a few times on the road in different parts of the year, so we are familiar with the potholes and other things that the planning department has noted. Obviously, the special use permit conditions do include road upgrades as required to enable a fire truck to go down those roads. So I think while I totally hear and frankly agree with some of the concerns that were brought up on the road access, I do think it's addressed already in the terms of the special use permit. I'll let Jacob address the power issue.
In terms of power, we put solar panels on the roof of each shipping container, except for the ones that store explosives, and that's, sorry again. In terms of power, we put solar panels on the roof of each shipping container, and that's enough to run the facility power and the security system, and then we have a backup generator in case for some reason that breaks. But the vast majority of the power is just provided by solar on the footprint of the roofs of those. It remains to be seen how well that works during winter, but that's our current plan as of right now.
Jeff Goings for the record. I just want to confirm, because this was a concern of the public, you have taken the security where you were going to have an armed security guard there, and that was requested that SO has requested that they be the armed security and not a blue on blue. They don't want your security there. They want Churchill County Sheriff's Office wants to handle that security.
That is correct.
Is there any other questions or concerns from the commission? Discussion?
Did we touch on the road situation? Have you guys driven that road? And
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
The road is lined out in the application to be maintained. Any other questions? All right, I would ask the commission to make a motion of the findings that they have been met or have not been met.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Zach Bunyan for the record. Based on the information provided in the application and staff report and heard tonight, I move that the findings have been met for conformance with criteria code found in Churchill County Code 16.08.080H for a special use permit for a rocket motor testing facility.
Motion been made by Commissioner Bunyard, second by Commissioner Hyde for the findings. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I now ask for a motion for the decision.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Goings for the record. I wanted to find that spot. Is that in part of our conditions here about that? 6B. Okay. 6B. But
6B is the one you're after?
Okay. So, based on the previously adopted findings made for the project, I move to approve the special use permit application for, your name now? Castilian Industries.
Needs to be stated as it is written in the record. Then it can be changed later in the office.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Special use permit application for Palace Industries, LLC, to authorize an explosion combustion testing facility on APN 009-291-09 The approval is subject to conditions as listed in the staff report, with one change being
6B.
6B would be that we would limit the amount of propellant to 1,000 pounds of 1.3, is that correct? 1.3 propellant.
Per motor.
Per motor, correct, yes, 1,000 pounds of 1.3 per motor, and not limit the diameter or length.
Second.
Motion been made by Commissioner Goings, second by Commissioner Hyde for the decision. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. There's a 10-day appeal period after this decision. The planning department will contact you after that period if no one's filed a complaint. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck getting out there when it rains. Hey, Chairman, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go use the bathroom. You can go ahead and move on forward, but I will be back.
Agenda item 9, public hearing. Item C, application for a zone change filed by Hooper Management Family LLLP and Cheryl Bancroft Trust for property located off of Gummo Drive. Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of that application? Please come forward. Push the little microphone button. When it turns green, state your name and address for the record.
Oops. Hi, I'm Cheryl Bancroft, and my address is 8625 East Sharon Drive in Scottsdale, but I've been here a lot lately. So my address has almost become Fallon.
Thank you. Director Spross, do you have a summary of the application?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Sprouse for the record. So this application is a zoning map amendment for two properties from E1 to R3. The use listing is a vacant and industrial. The applicant is Cheryl Bancroft, and the owner is Cheryl Bancroft and Hooper Management. The site is APN 008-391-28 and 008-391-29. There's currently no addresses on Gummo Drive, but it is west of the golf course, consists of 6.11 acres and 27.97 acres respectively. The designations in the master plan are urbanizing, and the existing zone is E1. So this proposed change in zoning is changing 13 acres along Gummo Drive to R3. So before I go through this entire application, one of the requirements that the staff was proposing for rezoning this to an R3 is to provide a traffic control plan. R3 has the ability for somebody to place a minimum of 16 units per acre up to a maximum of, well, I guess you can't do a maximum, let's do a PD, 16 units per acre. And because of the location of this property and its close proximity to the intersection of Gummo and 50, we deemed it necessary to have a traffic control or have a traffic study done. The applicant proposes much less than that, but if this property sells prior to or during the development, somebody would have the ability to put a lot more properties on there that they want. And so I spent some time today talking to the applicant and the requirements of the traffic control plan. And it was our initial recommendation to deny, recommend denial of this because we did not have a traffic control plan. We did have a couple of options that I discussed with the applicant. One of those options was for the applicant to request a postponement so that this traffic study can be done. And the other option was to completely withdraw the application and resubmit it at the time as plans for the development are submitted. The proposal is an option that the applicant would like. However, when there is a postponement done, it is a date certain proposal, and therefore it has to have some sort of duration on it. Typically, postponements are for 1 month to 2 months. We had recommended 6 months. The applicant will answer questions in a minute, but would like more than 6 months. And so we had suggested that maybe a withdrawal is more appropriate. But before I went through this entire thing, this entire application, which I will have to do again at some other point, I thought it would just be beneficial to have the applicant request either the postponement or the withdrawal.
Can I ask one
Thank you.
question? Whoops, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing I forgot to ask.
You have to ask them.
One thing
and
I
then
forgot
they
to
will
ask
me.
Chris
Yeah.
this afternoon is, when you're saying that someone could request 16 units per acre, where I'm only requesting about 6 for my multifamily, you can still turn that down, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Or
so you
not we.
still are in, well, I'm sorry, you can still turn that down. So you're in control if I were to sell it, which I'm not planning on selling it. I'm doing a phase where I want to do the single family, about 12 for the first year and about 12 the second, and about 12, a total of 36 the third year. Then the fourth year, when they get the water treatment plant done, and, you know, we're more ready to do another sewer lift station, if I'm calling everything the right stuff, then I thought that was when we could go into the multifamily. But I believe you're in control of how many people, how many units can be put on there. So all I'm asking is to start with the single and eventually 4 years. And I believe the plant is supposed to be done by the end of 2005. So that's only 3.5 years from now, right? 2.5.
If you're talking about 2025.
So I think that my timing is not pushing up the limits at all. But that's why I did want to just go ahead, because I already done all this, and get it done. I didn't know I was required to get a traffic study until Friday, and there's no way to get one done that quickly. But if they need to have me delay it 6 months, then I want to work with everybody. I'm not here to cause problems. So if we can delay it and that'll suit everybody, that's fine with me. But a traffic study is very expensive to just do 12 houses. I mean, it's $15,000 to $20-some thousand to do a traffic study. So that was my other concern. I'd rather wait till I've sold a few lots and had a little bit. I've been paying sewer hookup fees and everything for years and taxes since 2008. And yet there's nothing I can't build until that sewer gets done, and I'm still being charged fees every single month. And so, I don't know, maybe there could be some kind of abatement on the fees, or have them halted until I can be provided the sewer stuff and the things I need to go ahead and do a building. Because right now, there's, I keep paying, but I can't do anything to go forward. So I want to work with you guys, whatever you think is the right thing to do.
We understand, and we're not in a position to tell you what to do with your property. You want to decide what you want to do with your property, come to us and see what works and what doesn't work. That would dictate if you need a traffic study or if you didn't need a traffic study. So you would need to make those decisions, and then you would also need to make the decision of moving forward or withdrawing your application or postponing the application if you feel that you want to just do 12 units per the situation, but it's going to limit you in the future if you wanted to go do something else. So you may want to think about this for a minute before you decide.
How will it limit me in the future?
So if you help me, if you decide to do so many units per acre today and then get a traffic study based on that, and then you change your mind, it may not work out for you in the future.
So in other words, you're saying I'd have to do another traffic study?
Well,
Can you clarify that, Mr.?
the application before us is a zone change.
Right.
A zone change will change the density that you can go on that property. If you go with the traffic study as it is right now and get that study completed without the zone change, then if you ever go to a zone change, you're probably gonna have to do another traffic study.
That's why I'm asking for the zone change now or in 6 months. If you need me to delay it, obviously, to get a traffic study, there's no way to get it done in 5 days.
So I think what's being discussed is if you want to do a traffic study to address what your plan is, the 78 or however many units that were discussed, that's less than the total amount of density that would be allowed under R3.
That's
And
less than what?
That's less than the total amount of density that would have been allowed, that is allowed under an R3. R3 allows a maximum of 16.
And mine's 6, yeah. for
And
the-
yours, I
for
think, is 6 or something like that.
For the R3 part, yes.
The issue in front of the commission is, once this is zoned R3, it will be zoned R3. And so if you were to choose to sell the property to someone else or change your plan of development to match what R3 allows, then this commission would have already zoned it that way, and they would have a hard time justifying themselves to say, well, we only zoned it R3 because of the plan you presented, not based off what R3 the zoning itself allows. The discussion I think that's coming up in front of folks is if you just want to produce some single-family homes first, that isn't, I think, part of the R3 zone change at all. And so I think we're talking about two separate things. When we talk about the R3 zone application, which is what is in front of the commission today, the reason they're asking for a traffic study is based off of the maximum density that would be allowed based on that change. There could be a significant number of cars coming on the road, and that might be something that this commission would want to know before they approve it or deny it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, and just a point of clarification too, if this parcel is getting split to have E1 and R3, and having discussions with the applicant, we know what the applicant's plan is overall, and that's how we have to look at this project. We have to look at the project as a whole, and then if the applicant wants to build, 10 houses, 10 houses, 10 houses, that's the phasing of a project. And so by having to look at this as a whole and understanding that there could be 16 units per acre for 13 acres, we needed to have the traffic study done. We can't just say, okay, we understand you only want to build 12 houses, so you don't have to do the traffic study. Because after 12 houses, that whole property could be sold, and now you have somebody that comes in that does not have the same intentions as the applicant. And then we're stuck with a decision that was made based on one understanding, and now all of a sudden we have somebody else that is going to try to take advantage of the fact that it has been rezoned to R3. So we want to make sure that that traffic study is done, so you guys have a good understanding of what that traffic is going to be, and you can make a sound decision on whether or not that R3 is appropriate for in that area based on potential traffic.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Yeah, we have one thing here I think needs to be cleared up, because in your mind, you're thinking that somebody could come after, if you sold this, somebody could come later and then have to come before us. But R3, if we zone it R3, somebody buys that property from you, let's say you only were gonna build 6, but it's zoned R3. So they have the right.
So they don't have to have your approval?
They don't have to come before us to have 16 units. It's zoned R3. It's not a subdivision, it's not a PUD. It's based on that zoning. And Chris, you just reiterated that. But I think that was not clear earlier. I think you had in your mind that.
That
wait a
you
minute.
could turn it down.
Yeah, that we could turn it down, and that's not true. So
Well,
that's why
under
the
those
traffic study has to be
circumstances-
done for the scope of the maximum potential.
Okay, under those circumstances, then I ask for it to have at least a 6-month extension.
So then, Chris, would it be best to just postpone this for 6 months, or would you recommend that she withdraws her application until such time as she's had it done? How do you think we should approach this?
There's a hesitation on Ms. Bancroft's part to withdraw. There's been considerable amount of work done to date to get this to where it is. I did let Ms. Bancroft know that all the work that has been done up to this point will not be lost. The maps are still the maps, the drawings are still the drawings. The only thing that would, if the application is withdrawn, there would be the application fee again, which I believe is $300 at the time. The postponement is typically reserved for things that are going to happen in the near future. They're usually much shorter terms. But again, it's the decision of the Planning Commission to what duration you wanted to put on that. But understand, with a postponement, it is a date certain. It is being postponed for 6 months. So it will be on the meeting 6 months from now. Whereas a withdrawal gives the applicant an opportunity to take care of whatever needs to be taken care of, wants to be taken care of, and then come in and reapply again at that time. And, you know, from our standpoint, we've done a lot of the review. Unless things dramatically change, it should, from our standpoint, should go through our system relatively quickly. So it's really the decision of the Planning Commission on a duration. But I have assured Ms. Bancroft that all the work that's been done to date is not for naught. It won't be lost. It can be reused again with a new application. So I suggested to her to kind of figure out which way she wants to go on that, so.
Thank you.
I do appreciate all the work that both these gentlemen have done, and they've done a lot to help me, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time here as well. I do think I would still like an extension, because I would like to eventually get it all in order the way so that I can get it done. If anything happens to me, I want my son to already have it lined up so he can carry on. I'm not exactly 20 years old, so.
Okay, so you feel a 6-month extension would be enough time to get a traffic study performed?
I do.
and
I've already
returned?
met with the people in Reno that do the traffic extension, and they told me they could get on it right away.
Okay.
So I do think that it might prove that there isn't need for a big change. I don't think there's a huge amount of traffic there.
Thank you.
And I'm not proposing a huge amount of cars to add to it, so.
Thank you.
I've certainly taken that into consideration. When I found out the facts, I took into consideration the need for the water, the need for the sewer lift, and tried to plan my whole development as would fit the situation that presents itself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just make it clear, when you talk to the traffic engineer, they need to understand what the total scope, the potential is of traffic. So it might be more than what you're saying. That's why earlier I was saying R3, 16 units per acre, they need to plan for that.
Commissioner Hyde, just for point of clarification, that the traffic engineer who's doing the study has been in contact with Dean today already.
okay.
And he has kind of laid out the parameters of what the R3 entails.
Yeah, I just didn't
what
want to
the
get down
intersection
the
looks
road
like.
and then
Yeah,
find out that it wasn't sufficient.
yeah, no, I understand.
Mr. Chairman, my question would be to legal counsel. Is there any issues with us postponing for that length of time, or can we just move forward? We're good? Good?
Yes.
Well, then,
Hang on. Is there any other commissioners that have comment or questions? Is there any public comment? None heard. I ask the commission make a motion to extend this application for a period of 6 months as requested by the applicant. Does someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, Zach Brennan for the record, I move that we table this application for 6 months.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Bunyard, second by Commissioner Deal, that we table this application for a period of 6 months. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dean and Chris. You guys were awesome.
Agenda item 9, public hearing, item D. Petition filed by Fernley Business Park LLC for property located at 11,000 Reno Highway. Is anyone here to speak on behalf of the application? Please press the microphone button, turns green, state your name and address, business address for the record.
Rex Massey Industrial Realty Group, 1190 Selmy Drive, Reno.
Director Sprouse, you have a summary of this application?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris Sprouse for the record. So this is an application for an abandonment of a road to convert it to a private road. The use listing is industrial. The applicant is Fernley Business Park, and the owner is Fernley Business Park. The site is 11,000 Reno Highway, consists of 2 parcels, APN 009-251-78 and 009-251-77. It's approximately 163 acres total, and the designation in the master plan is industrial, and the zoning is also industrial. So the Fernley Business Park is served by a public road created during the previous land division actions. This road runs across the county line to intersect US 50A in Fernley. The road is created similarly for its length through the Fernley side of the county line and the Churchill County side. The application proposes to abandon the public interest in the road easement for the portion within Churchill County for the purpose of converting it from a public road to a private road. The easement would be replaced with a private road easement. So this road is important because it provides access to new lots in a merger and re-subdivision parcel map that was recently approved, but has not yet been recorded by the BOCC. The merger and re-subdivision element of the map is important because NRS allows abandonments to be implemented with them. Ownership of all land served by the road has always been under one owner over its history, who have always treated the road as a private driveway. In addition, a gate was installed that is not normally allowed on a public access easement. The matter came up during review of the recent parcel map, and the owner made it clear that they wanted the road to be private and gated, so this abandonment application was filed. This abandonment request should be incorporated into the final draft of the parcel map to be recorded, including changes for appropriate labeling, notes, and certificates. So the new lots must have service by a 60-foot road easement. The private road easement is acceptable for the parcel map, though it raises issues of who has ownership and right to use the road. For example, the parcel map includes a lot on the east side of the railroad tracks, and the map should clearly indicate the road access rights for the applicable lots. And the access to a road constructed to county road standards. As noted in the map approval and recent special use permits, the road is in poor condition, and the county requires that it be improved to county standards. In addition, the county wants road maintenance responsibilities to be clearly determined through an agreement. So NRS and county code requires notice for the hearings in the newspaper to landowners abutting the abandoned easement and to utility and video service providers, and such notice was provided. Notice of the proposal was also provided to other county departments. For example, the fire marshal had no objections, but wants to ensure that emergency access is provided through the gate, such as using a knockbox entry system. The road supervisor finds the abandonment acceptable and sees no public need for the road. The road has little likelihood of being extended beyond its current location, other than within the current rail park area. The county surveyor reviewed the proposal and has approved it, provided that the private easement is created to replace the public easement on the parcel map. We also received comments from NV Energy, and NV Energy has no issues with the abandonment of the road, as well as CC Communications has no objections to the abandonment of the road. So based on that information, staff has recommended approval. I do want to point out this is kind of a unique scenario because the top 700 feet of the road is actually in the city of Fernley, and the last 400 feet of what we're discussing now is in Churchill County. The city of Fernley had no appetite to do anything with this road. As you can see there on the outline, from the blue line back to Highway 50, that's in the city of Fernley. The applicant has mentioned to me that within the next 2 years, it is their intention to repave the entire road. And so at this point, the road that's being improved will be improved to county standards. We have received an agreed improvement plan, and we received the bond for that improvement plan today. So that means that once this has been agreed on and all the information is put on the parcel map can be recorded. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Mr. Massey will as well.
Thank you. Does the applicant have any statements or further discussion?
Just a couple of comments. You know, the underlying reasons we were seeking this abandonment is when we bought this property, it was bought as an operating business. And I'm sure that many of you have driven by the site. There is trucks moving in and out of the site all the time. There's heavy equipment being moved around the site. It is not a safe place for the public to be. And so I see it really as incompatible with a public access easement coming into an industrial site where there's a lot of equipment, trucks, and vehicles moving around on a continuous basis. So that concerned us that that's really an incompatible grouping of, you know, public with a heavy kind of a heavy industrial use. So that concerned us. Now, I'm not going to try to tell the Planning Commission that the public's down there all the time. They aren't, and that's one of the reasons for the request. It really isn't as mentioned, it really isn't used by the public. It really has no benefit that I can see. The second part of our request was looking at the site in terms of what the future use is going to be, and we intend, we'd like to secure the entire facility with a fence and even controlled access. And the controlled access being for property protection, vandalism, and the occasional ATV and off-road vehicle rider who drives through the site. We just really think that's not a place for that type of that type of use to come onto the site. So we would like to secure it. And as I think what's been mentioned is really what's being done here is that we're replacing a public easement with a private one of like kind, size, dimension, length, everything. And if there are going to be parcels that we own in there, we don't intend to sell them. They already have our business operations spread out across them. Now, I can't guarantee we're never going to sell them, but we're expanding our business operations across all of those parcels. And I think that demonstrates our intent to not to sell the property. And so we are going to provide access for each one of those parcels onto the private easement. So that should clear up any kind of problems in the future if the commission's concerned about, well, will a future owner have access to that easement? Yes, they will.
Thank you. Does the commission have any other questions or discussion? Is there any public comment concerning this matter? None heard. I ask for a motion for the findings for this matter, if the will or will not be injured.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Hyde for the record. Based on the information provided in the application, in the staff report and heard tonight, I move that the
Will not.
that the public will not be materially injured by the proposed abandonment of a portion of the road easement previously identified as Greenview Parkway, serving APN numbers 009-251-78 and -77.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hyde, second by Commissioner Dill for the findings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Now may I have a motion for the decision?
Mr. Chairman, one question, please, before we move forward. I just want to make sure that,
sir, you're familiar with all of the requirements that are going to be required in here. They're spelled out here. Just want to make sure that you've seen them, understand them, and that you're good with those.
We do.
Thank you. I now ask for a motion for the decision for approval or denial.
Mr. Chair, Zach Leonard for the record. Based on the previously adopted findings made for this project, I move to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners approve the proposed abandonment of the public portion of the road easement within Churchill County serving parcels A2A and A1A of the record of survey of a boundary line adjustment for Western Nevada Rail Park LLC, dock 403544, previously created in dock number 399749. This approval is subject to the following conditions.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Bunyard, second by Commissioner Hyde for the decision. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you.
This item will be forwarded to the September 13th Board of County Commissioners meeting. Or not September 13th, September, the first one in September. What is that one, the 7th? 7th, sorry.
Or is she stating that for the record? Are you stating that for the record, right, Diane? I don't need to re-say that.
That's correct.
Okay. Moving forward, agenda item number 10, action item, there's none. Action, agenda item 11, consent agenda. May I have a motion to
Mr. Chair,
approve the
Zach
consent
Leonard for the
agenda?
record. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Have a motion by Commissioner Bunyard, second by Commissioner Hyde to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you. I do have a question. When there's a motion for the decision, the findings, and it's based on the conditions, the applicant has already seen this piece of paper, right? And they know they should have already read those conditions.
That's correct.
So, like, we always have, ask them.
I like to put it into the record, though, because if it's up here, if they ever come back to you, they can't tell you that they lost that piece of paper or whatever.
And that's typically why I go through the conditions. The conditions for the last motion that you made was actually part of the motion, and that's why I didn't read them. I thought they had to be read as part of the motion. Well, that's what I was thinking too. And then, but I always read the conditions.
We always go back to them.
And typically, because, and I don't know if that's because it was an abandonment of an easement, which we don't see every day or every meeting. And so I just assumed that, because typically the conditions will say not part of the motion, and then I go through and I read the conditions. It did not have that on this abandonment, and so I made the assumption that that had to be part of the motion. So
So in the future, I need to catch that and to make them continue reading. Or one of you guys need to give me the eye to say, keep
Yeah.
reading. Okay. All right. All right. And so agenda item 12, public comment. Is there any public comment?
God, no.
Agenda item 13, adjournment. This meeting is adjourned at 10:03 PM. Thank you.